if there's or something, I'll have, 6 bees hanging on that hose bib just to draw that little bit of water. Which, why are you doing that? Why don't you go over here where there's all kinds of water? They go wherever they want.
They go where they want.
I guess maybe the rest of us could just use too. There's a pan over here.
Oops.
It all sounds like high maintenance. Mine are all far away. I never do anything. Except to find it wherever they find it. There's ponds and rivers nearby.
Yep. Yeah, well, and yours are also a ways out of town where you're not worried about what they do with the neighbors.
Right.
Neighbors are probably ways away, right? Well, I think we probably should get started. It's about 10 minutes after. So let's do the Kahoot quiz for the previous week. If you want to pull it up on your phone. All right, there you go.
Is game pen? Oh, got it.
There you are.
This gave me so much anxiety last week.
No. Deep breath.
And then what? I don't know. It was like 4 things you were supposed to read by tonight.
Yeah, well,
I did. The
Section
first
up to
one's supposed to
section
have been
3.
like a review. It must have started from the beginning. So I did like 1, 2, 3, and then whatever the 4th one was. I tried, but I had kids jumping on me, and I was like, "Stop!" No. No. So we got 3 of the 4. Oh, shoot.
Oh, you're
That's true.
Yep, I think they're both supposed to be true. I need to rewrite that question.
Yeah.
It should be the true answers.
Yep.
Or make it clear that there's
2 answers to that.
Yep. Okay, good.
The main one's
Let me share this. Hopefully that is enough that you guys can still read it. Should be right in the minimize that way. I can't find it. There it is. Okay, here we go. All right. Ooh, we all got that one.
Oh, did I miss the first? Oh, yes.
right, so something that someone asked last week, and I don't know the answer. Phil, do you know how long is each bee in a different stage, like house bee, nurse bee, forager? I'm not really sure.
That big chart I have shows the different stages, you know, like the first one's the feeding of over larva and, or cleaning and.
They have to be seasonally flexible too.
Yeah,
Sure.
That's the other thing. So, but the hypopharyngeal glands that the worker bees use to feed the larva, their peak performance is like 5 days old to 13, 14 days old.
Okay.
Those young nurse bees feed the larva the best. But then when they all cluster over winter and they have to start raising brood, you don't have any young bees. So the older bees have to kick back in and do that duty, even though they're 7 months old. So they are flexible. Yeah, there's kind of a standard progression.
Yeah, I never really thought about like how long each stage took, so I didn't know. Okay, Kyle's still on top,
Quick thumbs.
just barely. Yeah, quick thumbs. There you go.
You're lucky I missed the first question. I must have been wobbling, which is no surprise.
Okay, so yeah, correct answer is 2 miles. No, wait. Yeah, correct answer is 2 miles. So a couple of people choose what, half mile? That's kind of a rule of thumb that I use is 2 miles, but obviously the closer something is, the more efficient it is. That's where they're going to spend most of their time if it's there, if it's available. Here we go.
Gosh, I wanted
Did it kick you off?
to- Yeah.
There you go. Okay, so yeah, the broods or the drone brood cells are larger. I guess Wi-Fi here is not real
Doesn't
friendly.
like me.
Yeah, it doesn't like any of us. Okay, so yeah, no, you can tell a lot about how healthy the hive is based on how well fed the larva is. It's shiny white. Yeah.
Specifically how well the nutrition is in the colony.
Yeah.
Do not know the answers.
Yeah, so it'll show up in the young bees, in the larva
Mhm.
first. That's the best place when you're inspecting a hive and when you're looking at the brood frames. A lot of times that's one of the reasons why you're focusing on the larva is that's where the first signs of diseases will show up. Yeah. Cool. One more.
I developed a bee allergy 2 years into it,
No way.
and then you can get essentially treatments for that, and you can become immune again.
Did you do that?
Yeah, through a 5-year series of shots, and so you can inoculate your body.
Like it was bad enough that you felt you had to do
Yeah,
that?
my whole face swelled up.
Oh my gosh.
Is there any truth to, like, honeybees are different than, say, wasps?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I know
Which ones were you
beekeepers who
allergic
are
to?
allergic to wasps.
Yeah, so I developed an allergy to honeybees, so I got stung more than my body could build the antibodies, so you can develop allergies too.
Honeybees can only sting you once.
Right,
Wasps can sting you repeatedly.
right.
Well, it depends how many honeybees there are too.
Yes.
They're one each.
Yeah, one each, but
One
if there's 50,000 of them, that's a lot of stings, so.
So is it the more you get bit, then the chances,
It's
like,
just depends
would
on your
you say you
body.
build up an allergy to it?
You build up your immunity
It can
to
go either way.
But
Yeah,
yours went the other way.
It can go either way. My dermatologist told me that if I get stung more than about twice in the same session, exposure, start to take 2 Benadryl and see if that, and then maybe 1 after that. I've only had to take Benadryl once, and I've been stung 14 times in one session.
It's also, if you don't get stung, but you're exposed to venom, that's actually not good for you either. Because surface exposure is different than blood exposure. So you actually do want to get stung every now and then to build up your immunity.
Which
That's why
happens if you want to or not.
it's 10 times more likely that kids of beekeepers have bee allergies than kids of non-beekeepers. Because they're exposed to venom off the suit and gloves and stuff.
Yeah. I've heard that about
touch,
beekeepers'
they
wives,
touch
too.
it, but
They
so your
wash the
kids and
clothes.
spouses, if you don't wash your clothes, and keep on top of that, they get like micro exposures to venom on their skin, which their body, your T cells don't react to it because it's not actually in your blood.
So they build up, you said?
So it's better to get stung every now and then,
Mhm.
and that builds up your immunity than if you just get exposed on your skin all the time.
So be a little careful with your outerwear,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah.
Yeah.
The bees are stinging your
Stinging other
clothing all the
stuff.
time.
But you're saying it's good or bad for the kids to touch that stuff?
It's not good for them to be exposed to that without getting stung every now and
Yeah.
Oh,
You're going to be exposed to it off of your clothing.
Yep.
The bees are stinging your clothing all the time. You're out there.
mhm,
And so that residual is on your clothes.
mhm.
It's like fishing. You don't wash your clothes or wash your hands when you're going fishing.
And that's the
Usually
first
don't.
I've ever heard of that.
You
And
don't,
then 2 years after I got, my son developed allergy too, so he's finishing up his immunotherapy too.
Oh my gosh.
you don't usually wash your bee suits but once a year or so.
Oh, I do,
Once a season.
I do it every other week.
So is it all right to wash it in the same washer that the kids' clothes? are in?
Yeah, I think so.
The washing actually takes enough of it away.
Yeah, but
Okay. All right, I think there's one more. Yep, 12. Okay.
well done.
We got that one. All right. So who won? Was it Kyle or was it Amy? Did you get that right?
Well, I think I missed the first question, so that didn't help. Oh, did I win?
No.
Oh, dang.
I guess you lost.
I will see what the highest number there.
It's all right.
It was
I'm
nice.
not
There's only
competitive.
3 of us, we all get on the podium.
Yeah, there you
Yeah,
go.
yeah.
Okay. Okay, so what we're gonna do now, this is Phil Westra. He's a member of the Bee Club, raises queens. I'll let him introduce himself to you, but he's gonna go through some of his presentation on varroa lines. Then we'll go over my slides for this week. And I think Phil probably has the same opinion I do. If you've got questions at any point going through, go ahead and ask him.
All right, I got 2 handouts for you.
I got cables all over the place, so.
Try not to break anything here. So I'm one of the two Phils of the Bee Club that's an officer. We met Phil Breed. He's the vice president of the club. I'm the president of the club this year. And we are a group of people that like to talk about bees together. If you get into this hobby, you'll soon exhaust your friends because you're always talking about bees and they don't want to hear about it anymore. So join a bee club and then you can talk about all you want and learn from each other, and beekeeping is something that you never stop learning. And so club is great. And so I want to encourage you, after you take a class, if you get a hive, a couple hives or something like that, get involved in a place where you can bounce ideas and ask questions from each other. We generally meet once a month. We're hosting a field day, we have a picnic, things like that. So I'm here to share a little bit about varroa mites because if people ask the question, what's killing the honeybees, this is always one of the top three. And varroa mites are something that's in our colonies. They're here to stay. And if we don't deal with them, we won't have good success with bees. So this is a very zoomed in picture of a varroa mite. Oh, by the way, I do have a website called westrabees.com. I'm a sideline beekeeper. I'm a pastor. My regular job, I'm a pastor of a church, but I spend 1 day a week, 2 days a week in the middle of the summer, only with bees all day from sun up to sundown. Have about 60 to 70 colonies, and I raise queen bees and nucleus colonies and things like that. So I'm here to help out people in the area. So what are varroa? Why does this matter? Varroa are a parasite. They're parasitic mites. They feed on the bees and they reproduce within the sealed brood of honeybee colonies. So they're like, if you make a fist and put it on your body, that's like the ratio of the parasite to the size of the bee. It's a pretty big pest. And they stress the bee colonies because they feed on the developing pupa in the brood, and they also feed on the fat bodies of adult bees. I like to think of them as the shared heroin needle of the bee colony. They're piercing all these different bees and they're spreading diseases. Only this heroin needle reproduces itself too. So whatever diseases it has, its kids have. And so they vector diseases, they decrease the fat bodies, which is where the bee's fragile immune system exists. So if they're not managed, they will kill a colony. And I think you read a little bit about this. Can everyone see a varroa mite in this photo? Right in the middle, pretty much. It's that reddish brown. They're always little ovals. And if you see varroa on the top of bees like this, you probably have an infestation that's really terrible. Like you shouldn't see them really ever. They're not, their numbers should be low enough. Most of the time, they're actually on the underside of bees, and so you're not seeing them. When you start seeing them on top of the top side of the bees, you probably are to the point where you better treat, otherwise that colony will die at some point. You'll see varroa mites too when you're breaking apart the boxes and they build comb between the boxes and the frames. A lot of times they put like a row of drone brood. So when you open it, you'll break apart some of the drone brood. There are actually 3 mites in this picture because these are mites reproducing in this drone brood. There's the adult mite there, but then there's the developing mite there, and a nymph, really, really young mite down there. And so there are 3 mites actually in this photo. So this shows you that they are reproducing in that drone comb. So that's where they grow. That's where their numbers increase. As the bees are growing their brood, the mites are slipping in there before they cap it off. They actually have a little tiny, what do you call it? It's like a little snorkel. They can actually hang out in the jelly of feed and still breathe. And then once that's capped and the pupa start developing, they start eating the pupa and reproducing in the brood. If you take a frame and you flip it upside down, so this is actually the top side of the cells. That's actually varroa feces. If it's on the bottom side of the cells, it might be residue from, when they uncap things and stuff. But if you flip it over and you see it on the top, that's actually the excrement of varroa mites. And so one thing we do if our bees die and you open them up at the spring and you're trying to figure out why do my bees die, I always look at the top of my cells. And if there's a lot of that, I know I just had too many varroa mites, probably had too many diseases. The only thing I could do is try to treat better next year. And I actually like to think about this biologically as kind of in a grid. The things that are stressing our bees big time are pests and diseases. And you guys, that's why you needed to learn about that. So varroa are on the top of the list, but you got wax moths, small hive beetles, chalk brood, deformed wing virus, parasitic mite syndrome. Like those are diseases, pests. They will stress the bee colony. The bee colony has to exert a lot of effort trying to make up for that stressor that they otherwise would just use that energy to gather food and raise their young. The other stressor, of course, is poor nutrition. There are places around here in Northwest Iowa you could put a beehive out there and maybe one or two will do, but if you put too many, there's just not enough food in nature to feed them. And so that's a stressor. If they're flying a lot but not getting the benefits of those flights because they can't find food, that's a stressor. And then we have toxins in our environment. You've got chemicals from the environment, agricultural chemicals, even treatments of varroa can be residues. That's why you got to know what you're doing. And I say all three of these exist. So if you have like one stressor, maybe they can handle that. But if you have two of these three, they're really struggling. And a lot of the research that's happening right now is that what the bees used to be able to tolerate a certain level of varroa, but if actually they're also exposed to chemicals, they just don't have enough. They'll kill them between those two stressors. The colony collapses. Yeah, go ahead.
Can they sense those chemicals and stay away from them, or do they feed off of?
Yeah, sometimes they do, but often they don't. So what happens is, let's say someone sprays their apple trees with something really potent while there's pollen there. The bees are going to gather that pollen, and what do they do with pollen? They feed it to everyone else.
Yeah, so they will eat it still.
So, but if they sense there is actually some toxins in a cell, sometimes they'll actually enclose that and entomb it with wax, and they won't use that cell ever again. So if you see a lot of cells where they're actually only half full and they just like waxed it out, they probably are trying to block toxins in there. And the bees' wax kind of is the liver of the hive. It absorbs a lot of those toxins and they stay in that wax. So another way you can keep your colony clean is to every few years replace some of your wax, and that gets rid of some of those toxins. But again, this kind of depends who your neighbors are. It depends what environment you're in. These are environmental considerations. So I'm just saying, working on varroa is we're trying to decrease the stress of the colony by trying to address this. So because they're always dealing with all kinds of stressors. But I would say, these are the big ones for beekeepers. Am I staying on top of these pests and diseases? Can I get a sense that they're getting good nutrition to eat? And is the environment fairly clean? Those three things, your bees should survive and thrive. So this is what deformed wing virus looks like. In the development, this is a disease that might spread from bee to bee. They hatch and they look like this. That bee will never be able to fly. It's sick. What they generally do is they walk out of the hive and jump off and die. They just commit suicide. They're like, I'm not going to be worth anything, and they just leave. And so this is something just to keep your eye out for too. Just look, when you're scanning your bees, you kind of get a sense of what healthy bees look like the more you look at them and you scan the frames. If you see this is an example of a disease. It's usually because you've got a high mite infestation. And I think you saw this photo, but this kind of gives you an idea what happens. They start raising brood. Before they cap it, a mama mite goes in here, and the first the first offspring she lays is a male, and then she lays females, and the siblings mate with each other and reproduce in there. And so if the longer the brood is in there, the more opportunity the mites have to reproduce. And because of that, mites tend to flock towards a drone brood because the drones have a longer gestation period, a pupation period between the cells capping and them emerging. And so that's one strategy people do is they say, well, I'm going to put a frame of one back here. Okay. I'm going to put a frame in my box that encourages them to raise a bunch of drones. And right after they cap it, I'm going to remove it. And then you've just removed a whole bunch of varroa. So that's one.
Don't have it.
Okay, shoot.
Drone frame, sorry.
I forgot to bring one too. But they do actually manufacture green plastic frames that have a bigger cell size, and that encourages them to draw drones out. What I did also, when I had chickens in my previous life, I would put a medium frame in a deep box, and then they would build comb on the bottom of that medium frame. And they almost always build drone if they got like free space. And I'd take that medium frame and I'd just cut that comb off and let the chickens eat it. And then that would be one way of removing drones from your colony. But drone brood frames are one way that you can remove some varroa mites without using chemicals. And then, so since the varroa mites are reproducing in the brood of the bees, they track with the growth of the population. So as the bee population gets big, the varroa population starts getting big, and they lag behind it. And the critical time of the year is in the fall when they stop raising brood, and their population's decreasing, but the varroa population is still high, so the mites per bee gets really, really high. And this is when your colony collapses and dies. That's when suddenly there's so much diseases that the bees just abscond, they just leave. Like, bees are gone. Or there's a bunch of them that are dead there, or they just, it's a hopeless situation. There's just way too many mites, there's way too much disease, and they just leave. So this is why the Honeybee Health Coalition, Bee Informed Partnership, there's a lot of people that have a lot of good resources about varroa mites. And so the Honeybee Health Coalition is one suggestion that I would point people to. I didn't print it out because it's like a little mini booklet of everything you want to know about the best treatment options for varroa. This is what that'll look like. So if you go to Honeybee Health Coalition, you can download this as a PDF. I gave you this, and I think this is the best, like, concise explanation of varroa that I've been able to find. And this is resources for integration pest management, varroa mite control. Has anybody heard of the term integrated pest management before, IPM? It's a concept that comes out of gardening and farming. It's the idea is we've got this pest. How do we manage this pest with as many different diverse tools as we can? And so the idea is, can we cover our plants? Can we prop them up so fungus doesn't grow? Can we make sure we only irrigate in the morning so the water evaporates, so we don't get powdery mildew? So I love organic gardening, so that's one of the things. So IPM is trying to say, how do we tackle this pest from various different angles? The conventional way is to say, well, we have this pest, we have this chemical, let's spray it with a chemical. Integrated pest management says, well, there are other options. Let's actually not make chemical the first option, make it the last option, and see if there's other things we can do to control. So that's what this little handout is. And to direct you to that, so the IPM is often described as a pyramid. If you Google it, you'll have several different ideas of a pyramid. The idea is, first of all, at our baseline, is there any genetic dispositions that would help us fight this pest? So if you buy, you know, tomatoes or something, you'll see this is resistant, this variety is resistant to that blight or something like that. So that's genetic. If you can get the genetics of a plant so the pest doesn't affect it, you're done, right? You're taken care of. On top of that, then you have to have some kind of monitoring system, some way of checking. And then there's cultural controls, like physical barriers you're set up or certain ways of doing things that will get rid of some of these pests without chemicals. And then you have natural chemicals and synthetic chemicals as your kind of top. So the idea is you have try to build a foundation so you don't have to use those chemicals as much
I have a
and as
question.
often. Yeah,
So is that like genetic, how you talked about that, is that just like a theory or is that factual that there's things in the garden like tomatoes that?
that's factual.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if you were saying, yeah.
No, yeah, so you can, if you can buy seeds, and I said, these are immune to these diseases.
There's a lot of people working on getting bees that will have that genetics
Yeah.
that they can resist or live with the mite
Tolerate
tolerance.
mites better, yep,
So there's a lot of people, you know, it isn't just like just here, it's the whole country and
yep, yep.
lots of places. So there's a lot of people working on that.
Yeah. So that's the research that's happening right now, is there, how do we breed bees that can fight the mites on their own more? That's what I'm involved in. I'm trying to do that on a small scale. So that's the theory is. And so if you can try to start with, if you have an option, well, I could get bees from someone that says there's some Varroa resistance and someone else that, like, well, I don't care about that. You know, you're gonna be better off probably going with someone that has some Varroa resistance, or just know if they don't, you're just know there's no genetics, you have to work on the other things above.
Your drones go out
Yep.
and mate with
Yep.
other queens.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
transfer the mites,
And
right?
that's right, and that's
Yeah.
that's the battle.
Yeah.
If we could just tell, now you colony, I only want you to mate with that colony, like if that happened.
Yeah.
But no, once you have some genetics, and the next generation, I don't know if how much of those genetics got passed on, so again, you have to monitor and generation, and that's some of the stuff I'm working on, my side project, some of that. So foundation is good genetics. So if you can use queens that are selected for Varroa resistance, Varroa sensitive hygiene is the technical word for that, VSH traits. And if you read about this, there are some people that say, well, these bees have really good grooming, so they actually knock a lot of mites off because they groom a lot. These bees are found that they bite. There's mite biters, they call them, you know, so they bite at the mites and they kill some mites. I think the most promising research right now is Varroa sensitive hygiene, which means that these bees are disposed to smell that there's something wrong with the brood that's capped, they're infested, so they actually uncap it and remove it. That's what VSH is. It's a behavior trait in the bees that are removing infected brood, and therefore they keep the mite load down. So that's the golden key. It's really hard to do. We're working really hard at it. There's even instrumental insemination, from artificial insemination to queens, to try to help this work out. So that's the genetics, and then on top of that, now we have to say, how do we conduct regular monitoring? So we take mite counts of our bees. We sample our bees, take a mite count, and then track how many mites per bees do we have in our colonies. And then the other cultural controls, we can remove mites with drone traps. Brood breaks are when you take the queen, you confine the queen to just a cage or something like that for a couple weeks, and then you let her back out. That was but a break in the brood, so the mites couldn't reproduce for a while. That's a strategy some people do. And then you've got treatments, and you got organic acids and organic oils that seem to be less prone to the mites building resistance to. And then you got the synthetic hard chemicals and the synthetic chemicals will leave residue in your wax. If you use synthetic chemicals year after year after year, you do want to rotate wax. There's been some studies that if too many of these synthetic chemicals are in your wax, your drones actually are less fertile. So the mating of the queens goes down and things like that. So that's the idea. You try to start with the best genetics you can, you monitor, and then you see if you can control with cultural controls and treatments. So how do you tell if you have varroa mites? Yeah, I want you to turn the lights on here. There are a few different ways people do this, but the most effective way is to get something like this is a kit you can buy. And what you do is you want to take a frame that's got bees on it, generally on the edge of a brood nest. And if you watch the video, some people like brush it against the bees and they fall in here. But what I do is I make sure the queen's not on there and I shake this frame of bees into a tub. Just go like this, they all fall down in the tub. The older foragers will fly out and the young nurse bees that can't fly are going to stay in there. And then I take this scoop, is the same contour as this Rubbermaid tub, and I scoop a half a cup of bees is about 300 bees. Unless you want to, 1, 2, probably not. So you scoop 300 bees and you put them in alcohol and that kills the bees. It kills the mites and the mites fall off the bees and fall on the bottom and then you can count. How many mites in 300 bees were there? And that's a way of monitoring. So some people say, I don't want to kill any bees, that's terrible. I think about it, actually it was Ellen Bell who said, think about it as a blood test. You're just taking part of you to test it for pathogens. About 500 bees die in a day in the summer anyway, so you're not really hurting your hive. Unless you'll have a really, really tiny hive, then you don't want to do this quite yet. But so if it's a big hive, we put 300 bees in here, swish it around in alcohol, and they fall to the bottom. Here is one that, pass that around. I think there's 2 varroa mites in the bottom of that. There's still bees in there. If I use 90% alcohol, I can just let them sit there for months and it doesn't rot and get disgusting. So what I do actually, because I have a lot of hives and I want to monitor really well, I have a whole bunch of these. And so what I do is I put masking tape and I label my hive number on it. So I fill them with alcohol, I label them, then I go out to my bee yard and I take all the samples and I bring them home and look at them. You don't have to do it that way.
The little tiny dots?
Yeah, those little round, there's 2 little
Yeah.
brown ovals in there. So that was 2 bees per 300, or 2 mites per 300 bees.
So is that considered not, you don't need
So,
to treat?
so I don't need to treat, that's under that threshold.
That's not monitoring the nymphs, right? That's just
Right. That's just, you're just taking and you're trying to get close to the brood nest because
Yeah.
a lot of the mites are going to be on those nurse bees, hopping in and out of the brood. They will go on the foragers, they'll go on the drones, but generally if you want to have some consistency, I always just monitor the brood. And a lot of beekeepers say, well, you look at the brood nest, let's say the brood is on these 5 frames, we'll take the one right next to it, or these 2 and shake them in and you get a good average. I don't like to pull the middle of the brood nest, it's more likely your queen's gonna be there. So I look for the queen, I shake it off, I let them fly out, and then I look for the queen again, because you don't want to put your queen in the sample. And then so I'll do like 40 of these, and they'll all shake and rattle on their way home, and then I can look at them and see how many mites are in each one. So this is a really good tool. You can brush if you don't like the idea of shaking. You get a bee brush, you just brush some off. But I think this is the easiest way to do it. It's pretty quick. Like I said, a half a cup, Rubbermaid tub, and a test bottle.
And
That's
in
really what-
comparison, I have fewer hives, so I have 2 of those, and mine are kind of paired hives together, and I'll go out and do 2 of them and shake them there and look and measure and do the whole thing and record it, and then I'll go on to the next couple and do it. Where those got a good system where he doesn't have to sit there and shake and count while he's outside.
I gotta try to get
Whatever works for you.
60 of them done in a day. I'm gonna not empty, refill, all that stuff. I'm just gonna, get them all out. So I've actually also kind of helped people do this for the first time too. We've had some people in my club say, I've never tested for mites. I've been a beekeeper for 5 years. They've died every winter. Maybe I should monitor for mites. Let me come out and help you. And I'll show them how to do this and I convince them to buy their own kits. So
Is it usually mites or is it sometimes the weather or like, is it usually something? Or is it hard to tell?
why when
Like
they
when,
die?
yeah, and they're like, they died. Is it usually mites or is it sometimes they make it through the
It's
winter?
often mites. If they don't have enough food, they can starve.
Yeah.
So it's starvation, it's mites, or it's moisture.
It's one of the many things like
Yep.
people keep asking about, what's killing the bees, the colony collapse.
Yep.
You know, it isn't, this is it and that's it.
It's that
it's
network
the
of
whole
stressors.
thing of
Yep.
This and that and the food and the
Yep.
mites and
Yep.
the weather and all that kind of stuff.
So, one, like, this is something, I'm sure you'll cover this, like kind of just diagnostics, coming out of spring. Why did my hive die? There's some, look for this, look for that, look for that. I've actually taken the pile of dead bees and done a mite wash on them and found, oh, there's a lot of mites in there.
Yeah.
I didn't get the numbers down in time because once winter hits, they're clustered together, you can't really just disturb them. So, but yeah, it's usually starvation, moisture, mites, lack of good nutrition, chemicals, some kind of disease. So anyway, that's kind of what a mite wash looks like. And it's good. We'll, if you are part of the club, we can do this on a field day. You can try it out yourself.
And
So this
how
is,
often are you doing it?
so I do washes once in May, once in June. I don't mess with it in July because all the honey supers are there. And then once I harvest the honey, August and then September. These are the 4 times I'm doing mite checks. Because they're just starting to build up in April. So by May, there's a big enough population I could take 300 out and I won't be disrupting them. So in May, I'll do a wash. If they need to be treated, I'll treat them and then I'll test again in June to make sure the treatment was effective. And then the same thing, after I take the honey supers off, I'll do an analysis in August. And if I need to treat, I'll treat. And then September, I'll see if it worked. And sometimes, every now and then, you're like, the treatment didn't help. I need to do it again. And then you do it again, and then you take another sample to make sure it's, and sometimes 2 in a row, it didn't work. I'm like, well, do it a 3rd time, but these probably will die. And that's why you want 2 or 3 hives.
And I've had the experience where you got your numbers and I write them all down, I had 9 mites and I treated, and then I had 15 the next time.
Yeah.
Why is
Oh,
that?
man,
Or I
that's
had
not
9,
Yeah,
and then next time
Yeah.
I had 3, which is what you're looking for,
Yeah,
something
you're
to
looking
go
to-
down, but
They went down quite a bit.
You know,
Yep.
I had like 20 hives and some go up, some go down, and it's, what's the answer?
And I think food and genetics are part of that too.
So then how does that affect the actual honey that you're harvesting? I mean, how do you keep them, like do mites and these things make it to the honey?
No. Generally, so that's why I'm testing and treating before and after the honey flow. So spring and then fall. There are treatments that you're allowed to have while honey is being gathered. Most of them you can't. I just choose to say, I'm not going to put any treatments on while they're getting honey. Keep it as clean as possible. That's my own personal philosophy. If you look at this handout, this talks about the idea of integrated pest management. The second page talks about those cultural controls, like your varroa sensitive hygiene, the grooming behavior, the ankle biters, the Russian bees. Russians in general seem to have a higher rate of varroa sensitive hygiene, but that doesn't guarantee anything. Again, VSH is a trait, not a race of bee. So Any bee can have some VSH traits in it, but Russians seem to be better adapted for it. And this all goes back to the fact that mites used to coexist with one type of honeybee, the Apis cerana, which is in Asia. And then what happens in those is the mites never are in the worker brood, they're only in the drone brood. And the Apis cerana could just coexist and it just hurt some drone, but it never killed colonies like it does. Then they jumped to the Italian and Cardium, the types of bees we keep, and they weren't ready for it. And that's why in the early 90s, colonies were just collapsing left and right. So the bees have to adapt. They have to, survival of the fittest. The best bees are going to be reproduced, hopefully, and be more resilient. And that's kind of where we are in that long, slow process of trying hard to get bees that are responded without control. But at this point, most of them aren't. Most of them will die with Varroa. So that's kind of some of the cultural controls. And then this next page are treatment options. I'm sorry. Oh, this is still cultural controls. Drone comb, removing brood. This is the treatment. The one that has different colors. That's the treatment options. So you've got the different kind of active ingredients, the acids and oils up here, and you got the hard chemicals down here. And different treatments require different things. So some treatments will, you kind of replace them and the fumes in the hive will kill the mites off the bees as they're emerging. So you have to keep them in there for a while. Some of them, like the formic acid, the mite away quick strips, those actually can even penetrate the wax and they'll kill the mites even in the brood. But the problem with that is if it's hot, that's really terrible for the bees. So you want to make sure the mite away quick strips, I don't know if it says that there. That's the very heat sensitive one. Oh yeah, there's temperature variance down here. The mite away quick strips want to be in the coolest environment. So again, this is all, hopefully this is like your reference for treatments. And then the next one is, can you treat these with honey supers on or honey supers not on? That's there too. So generally the mite thresholds right now, University of Nebraska is still recommending this. I think this is what the Bee Informed Partnership is recommending, is they still 2% in spring and 3% in fall. So because they're naturally going to be less in the spring, the brood hasn't. So if anything, if I have 6 or more mites in a sample, I treat in the spring. If I have 9 or more in a sample in the fall, I treat. And so May and June, July, I use this 2% and I use the 3% in August and September. I should say May and June. I don't do it in July. But. So here's an example of a couple of my hives. And this is summer, so they're big. There's lots of, I put 3 deeps on because I want to get some honey and some brood to use for splits and things like that. Is it not sharing? No. Okay. I had changed it. So I did a mite wash for these, and colony number 1 had like 5 mites in the wash, which is pretty good for a colony that big. It's still under the treatment threshold. And colony number 2 had 36. So you can have bee colonies next to each other, and one's doing really good and one's doing not. The big commercial people will always sample a percentage. So if they have 1,000 hives, they'll sample maybe 50 or 80 or something like that and say, okay, I'm getting averages. Should I just treat them all or not? A backyard beekeeper, you can pay attention to each colony. You can assess each colony and treat it if it needs it or not. I think that's an advantage of being a small scale person. You can actually pay a little more attention to each colony instead of just saying, well, one size fits all, that's what I'm going to do to these 1,000. I'm still trying to be that attentive to each colony and assessing every single one and treating them individually and not just everything. Some of the treatment labels will say, if you treat one colony, you should just treat them all in your apiary. I think that's a way of selling more product, honestly. I don't find that that's a requirement. It's true that some drones will leave one hive and then come back to another one. They're very social, and so they will spread mites around. And which is why if you have a neighbor that's got a whole lot of mites and you don't, well, some of their drones might infest yours eventually. So you just got to stay on top of it. You want to monitor every now and then. You don't want to say, I don't see any on any bees. I'm fine. You really do want to do something to sample and know where you're at. So I'm sorry, 3 and 27. It's 1% infestation, 9% infestation was what my results were. And if you look at it, oh, 2, it's got a big population. This is what I hear people, well, had a big population, it should be fine. I didn't see any mites on the bees, it should be fine. And they looked healthy, you know. Well, do you really know if there's mites in there or not? You don't unless you assess it. So you're going to be looking at combs a lot and kind of scanning over combs. And the more you do this, the more you get used to what bees should look like, the quicker you can point out when bees don't quite look like they should. Anybody notice any bees that are not so good in there? Scanning over there.
There's some wing virus in there.
Yep, so you see some deformed wing virus. Right there and right there. Actually, you can even see a mite on a bee right there. This was a nuke I bought from somebody. It was just diseased. It died 2 months later. So this is why it's nice if you can, if you don't know who you're buying your bees from, I want to look at them. I want to see them. I just want to peek and make sure they're healthy. Zoom that in. That's what that looked like, that deformed wing bee. Also, there was another disease. I don't remember what it's called, but there's a disease that causes them to pick their hairs out so that it's all black. If a bee doesn't have any hair, it'll just be black like that. So it's actually infected with multiple diseases there. And so, in conclusion, do not think ignorance is bliss and neglect to monitor varroa levels in your colonies. People do that. Don't say, well, since I don't see mites on my bees, I'll assume they're no problem. Don't see your colony getting large, gather a lot of honey, and think these are signs varroa is not to be a problem. And do not assume an intervention or treatment worked without retesting the levels. Oh, and then this is my favorite. I'm going to be a treatment-free beekeeper. Put some bees in a colony and see if they live. You're not saving the bees if all you do is buy some bees and they die. You actually not really helped anybody at that point. If you care about the bees, you're going to actually see that they do well. My goal is to be a treatment beekeeper because my mite loads are always low enough. I don't need to treat. And so I'm trying to work on the genetics to do that. But if they are high, I'm going to treat because I want them to live. And so that's what I'm trying to work on. I'm trying to, every year, try to increase the genetic traits that fight against varroa, so I have to treat less and less. And that's what I'm working on. But you have to have a lot of plan and ambition to do that. That's not something you do your first 3 years of beekeeping. That's something you do after you've been at it for a while and you want a new challenge and that sort of thing. So what? Go ahead.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is this disease or is that like if you're not a beekeeper but they're just out in nature in a tree, whatever?
Yep.
Is it less prevalent there, or do these diseases still come?
Varroa kills wild bees too. Some of the bees, like if you've got a colony that's lived in a tree for 6 years, it probably has some varroa sensitive hygiene. It's probably resistant. So that's actually one of the things we're doing is we're trying to find wild colonies that are fine and then grafting some eggs from them to use in our bees. So that's one of the ambitions. So one of my partners in Vermont, we trade queens and we trade genetics. And he's got bees in the wilds of the Adirondack Mountains, and there's still a lot of wild bees in the trees there. So I get 20 queens from him every year to keep genetic diversity in mind, because I don't have a lot of wild bees around So that's, but his queens are mating with the survivors in nature.
Before we get too far away
Yeah.
from it, you mentioned one of the causes of hive collapse is moisture. What?
Yeah, so that was
Is
if you
that
don't
too much?
if you don't insulate the top of your hives in winter,
Got it,
condensation builds up and then it rains down on them.
got it.
I have had a lot of moisture death this year.
Okay.
I don't know why.
Huh.
You do your best and sometimes the moisture still gets to some of them. The idea is if you put insulation between your inner cover and your outer cover, there's not as drastic of a temperature change inside the hive to the outside, so it's warm, the bees are warm, they're breathing, they're exhaling moisture. That all collects on the top and then can freeze there if it's
Yeah.
too cold. The idea is you want it to actually not collect, you want it to be warm there too, so you want some insulation there. It's all right if it collects around the outside, because that won't rain back down on them. You just don't want it to collect in the middle, so I always put a piece of insulation for the winter.
When you're talking insulation for there, are you talking like that almost bubble wrap?
I
with
use
the
I use
shiny-
a 2-inch foam board.
Okay.
I think Dean might go into some of that when he talks about equipment.
I had some of that last week.
Yep.
Insulated cover that.
Yep.
Okay.
So yeah, winter, I think that's the most important thing to do is put some insulation in the top of the hive and put something that's gonna keep the mice out of it too.
And to that fact, we talked about the club that we have. Phil will do his one way, I'll do mine a
Yep.
certain way. John's is different. Some people use different things. So there's, a dozen
Mhm.
different ideas of what you might want to try.
Yep.
Not that anyone's perfect and right, but,
Yep.
it gives you options and ideas.
Yeah, so we have the same goal, insulate, we have different equipment and different, strategies of doing that. The other thing you'll hear people use the term quilt board or moisture board, and that's actually a box with a screen, and they'll put like wood chips, and that'll actually absorb the
Oh,
moisture
yeah.
up there. So that's another thing, but if you got, 80 colonies, you don't want to buy 80 quilt boards, you want to get 80 pieces of foam and stick them in there. So there comes a point where the beekeeping supply companies will sell you anything you could ever dream of. And it's like, how much can I afford to spend on this hobby? Just the boxes and the frames and everything else is enough. And now I just told you should buy a couple monitoring, jars and things like that. So what I suggest you do is make a plan to regularly take varroa samples. Monthly is best. I've used alcohol washes. People say, oh, I don't want to kill the bees. I'll dump a bunch of powdered sugar on them and then I'll let them groom and then I'll see if there's any mites in that. That is an absolute mess. I don't know why anybody decided that was a good idea. If there's a nectar flow, you shake bees in powdered sugar, they all barf their nectar up and you got like dough. It's like, that was bad. So I would just use alcohol. Use a drone frame to trap and remove varroa mites. That's something you might want to try doing. Maybe you're second or third year into it, once you feel comfortable experimenting, that'd be a good thing to try. Try to get some queens from that have some varroa resistance, and then treat the colonies when they're over that infestation threshold, stick to that. And then rotate treatments. So don't just use the same thing over and over, because then we're actually increasing the likelihood that these mites are going to develop resistance. There's a lot of different options, so try to rotate them a little bit. So that is my presentation. You want to flip the lights back on. This is my own personal plan. So every year I write up what my plan is for my yard. The thresholds, what I do to sample mites, what I'm doing to prevent, the cultural controls. And on the back is what I'm using for treatments. So I do a year A and year B cycle. So every other year I do something different. So in the spring, in May and June, usually there's pretty low mite loads. The least, I think Andy Joseph thinks that the easiest chemical is Hop Guard. Like that's the least thing that's gonna have any kind of side effects. And Hop Guard is something, so I put in Hop Guard strips, you put them in there for 2 weeks. And they seem to knock them down in the spring. Hop Guard seems to work even if it gets a little cold. The temperature thing here. Hop Guard is this thing that's, doesn't matter what the temperature is, it's effective. And so that's my spring, and then in the fall, after the supers are harvested, that's generally when you'll most likely need to treat. And so one year I'll do the app of our life, it's called, it's a thymol, it's like 4 different essential oil type things that are pretty effective. That actually requires you to do 3 weeks in a row. You put it in, 3 weeks later you put it in, 3 weeks later you put it in. Those fumes need to be there while all the brood is hatching. And then every other year, then I use what's called formic acid, Formic Pro. It's called Midaway Quick Strips. And that's another organic acid that is available for treatments. The other thing, I don't have it on my treatment paradigm, but a lot of people use oxalic acid. That's a really popular one. And you can vaporize it, or you can have slow release sponges, or you can dribble it on them. Again, look on the internet about how to treat. Oxalic acid is a pretty popular one, and it seems to have less side effects a lot. So that's my ROA 101. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Thanks, Bill.
Yep.
Might want to jump over to that one so you're not in the blinding light all the time.
Last year, I sold 3 of your class participants' nucleus colonies in the spring. This year, I don't have any to sell because I had high enough loss, and I had people reserve them already in November. So otherwise, I'd usually say, I got some bees for you if you want them, and then you can contact me if you have problems with them. But can't do that this year, sorry.
Do you know of anyone in the bee club who does have them still available?
So there's some information here to pass around. Take a picture with your phone or something.
This one?
All 3 of those.
Yeah.
So there's Foley's Russian bees, which he's down in southern Iowa, not exactly local, but still Iowa. Bell Farms, which is just south of Des Moines, southwest of Des Moines. And then the other page is some local beekeepers. So Todd Osterberg, who was here in the first meeting, he will have some news. There's a couple other club members, and then at the bottom of that, there's non-club members. But
Tyler Holton has a drop off in Lamar's this year, so.
yeah, Tyler Holton is on there, and Kelly Lyons brings packages right into Dayton, so it's pretty convenient to go pick them up down at Dayton's. So I'm not gonna share this, so the Zoom can kind of see all of us having a conversation, but I'll put my slides up here so you guys can see them. And we'll just kind of start going over session 3, what was on session 3. And I'm gonna go around and ask you questions, or ask you to tell me how something worked, or explain something. And like I said earlier, if you don't know, or for whatever reason, you just say pass. I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but I want to get some conversation going. So we'll start with you. So this one talked a lot about equipment. So what's some of the equipment that you have to have, or probably should have, to get into beekeeping?
The beehive, does that count as the thing? Okay.
Yep.
The clothing, protective gear, for clothing, and then that one tool, that puff thing that you had last week or showed us.
Puff thing,
Is that-
Tough thing. Yeah.
That thing that's like a cigarette or something.
Smoker.
That's all I got.
Smoker.
The smoker.
You get a hive tool.
Oh,
got
yeah, the
everything.
tool. Was that up there when you asked me?
No.
No.
It was not. Yeah, I don't think I really have too many questions over this, but, going through the hive again and what's out there in the atrium is a better example.
Mhm.
We can go through that later, but, your telescoping cover keeps the rain and the elements off of the top. Something I like to stress is that inner cover makes it easier to take the top off because we'll show you out there, you can get a hive tool under the corner of the inner cover and pop it right off. Telescoping cover, you have to put the hive tool underneath and pry up and out. They're hard to get off if the breeze is stuck down. The inner cover offers a little bit of insulation. Here we usually use shallow or medium supers for the honey and deeper boxes for the brood where the bees are raising the young bees. And again, any questions as I'm buzzing through these, just stop me.
On your note of getting the lids stuck down, is there anything anyone's tried with making it harder for them to stick it?
To prevent them from putting propolis in? Not specifically that, but
You want them to,
You want them
You
to.
do want to seal it.
well, but over the years, people have tried to breed bees that use less propolis. Because it's an inconvenience for the beekeeper. And now we're finding.
backfired.
Yeah, Marla Spivak at University of Minnesota has discovered that propolis, like they call it a propolis envelope, if the bees cover the whole inside of the hive with propolis, that's beneficial to the health of the bees.
What is it? I don't remember
So-
reading that.
Propolis, we haven't talked too much
Oh,
about it,
okay.
and I don't really have any on the slides, but it's, the bees collect it from the growing buds of trees. It's like a resin.
Yep.
It's really sticky. We'll show you some. I think
It's an antibiotic.
Yeah.
So was there a suggestion on roughening up the insides to a certain extent
Yes.
to encourage them?
Yes,
Some
there is.
people are
There's
doing that.
actually a company in Sioux Falls that's now selling hives that the inside is roughed up, and they say it's a specific process.
Proprietary.
There you go. And the bees will cover it with propolis, and yeah, it's supposed to be health benefits.
Just one other thing, when we were talking about the genetics and you want to get them so that they'll make the propolis, but yet you're trying to make them so that they're resistant to the varroa, but you want them so they'll make a lot of honey, and then you want them so they're nice and gentle.
Yeah,
So there
exactly.
isn't,
You can't do it all.
there isn't one thing that
No.
makes the
Yeah.
perfect bee, you know.
They can make as much propolis as they want as far as I'm concerned. They're gentle and SH, that's all they care about.
Because they'll make honey.
Yeah, they'll make honey. They're healthy, they'll make some money.
So Brenda, is it?
Yeah.
So what are some reasons that people or beekeepers might use 8-frame mediums instead of 10-frame deeps?
Mostly weight. The 8-frame mediums were like 25 pounds full, less than the 10-frame deeps, I think.
Yep, I think that's about right.
Those are really heavy when they're full.
Yeah, so like, it's like, well, you can lift that, but can you lift it without smooshing the bees against yourself? Maybe not. Or at least that's how I think
Really?
of when I lift things.
And do you have to carry it very far, or do you just
Right.
move it here to there?
Yeah. I could see how that would be beneficial.
Absolutely, yep. And that's the main thing. And then there are some other things that come with that. Like if you go all 8-frame mediums like I do, you've got more boxes to deal with. I have to buy
Right.
more boxes. When I inspect a colony, I've got way more frames than you do because I've got 3 or
Yeah.
4 mediums. It takes longer to find the queen.
Sure.
So,
You run all mediums?
yeah,
Okay.
yep, all 8-frame mediums.
I bet you were thrilled to have my deep nuke last year, weren't you?
Yeah, there's the other inconvenience is I have to have at least one 8-frame deep when I buy a new.
Get it going,
Deep
yeah,
frames
good.
in, yeah. Some of this I added or updated today. We got 25 pounds is about the difference. So Kyle, tell us about queen excluders and what they're for.
Keeping the queen out of the supers. So you end up with just straight honey up there.
And why don't you want brood up in the honey frames?
It's a little hard to get clean honey out of there.
There you go. Yeah. It's an inconvenience, and if you uncap them and didn't notice it, now you've extra
which you
protein.
could filter out, right?
I don't know about that.
No? Okay.
If you got something like that in the
I
honey,
don't know, I don't think.
You kind of scrape.
You
around
cut a
that
brood in
and
half,
scrape
it's,
it
there's
away.
liquid brood in it, so,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
now, like, let's say you scrape the frame a little bit, you got some wood in the honey from scraping the
Yeah,
frame,
that's
or bee wings or bee legs, absolutely.
That gets
You can
filtered.
filter
Okay.
those out,
Okay.
but no.
Anything
brood
that's
is a little
liquid
more
in honey
liquid.
is, yeah,
That's
yeah.
more liquid. Okay.
Yeah, good question though. And why, Amy, why do some people not use queen excluders? We don't know. Mainly, it slows things down. Bees are reluctant to go up through them. The bees can fit through them, but they're fairly tight, so it slows them down. And sometimes you can put a queen excluder on and put a box up above, and they will completely ignore it. And if you let it go long enough, they'll swarm because it's like they're out of space, even though there's this empty space up above.
Especially if it's new equipment and not, just frames with foundation and no comb in it.
So I don't see the question, but I know it's in here somewhere. So the text talked a little bit about how to get around that reluctance of the bees to go up above the queen excluder. Remember that?
Yeah, it was taking the excluder off for a period of time, like one cycle of hatching. I think, wasn't it? And then,
Wasn't
Putting it
quite
back on? Not
specific
quite?
to
Okay.
a brood cycle, but yeah, it's to put the super on without the queen excluder, and a week or so later, go back in, and as long as the bees have done some work up in that super, now you can put the queen excluder on.
as long as you find her and she's not up
Yeah.
top.
That's
Yes.
the next question. As long as you make sure you find the queen and she's down below the queen excluder, to keep her down in that brood nest. Yeah. Okay, Kyle, tell us about the significance of foundation in beekeeping, and why we use foundation.
So you get a nice straight comb. So you don't start.
Absolutely, so don't build it across the frame, so you can pull one frame out at a time. Some other things are, we kind of force them to all make the same size cells. Because the 5.4 millimeter that most foundation is, it works for worker brood. It doesn't work for drone brood. It's too small for the drone brood, but it does work for storing honey. So that's another reason is we're limiting the amount of drone brood that they make.
Puts them in the bottom corners even though they'll still use it sometimes.
Yeah, they'll find places to put some drone
See
in
a
the
few
corners.
drone like down here and down here, even on that.
They can
Yep.
like raise up off of
They'll
that
figure it out.
and draw their own pattern out to the corner of the end.
We know what you're trying to do, we're gonna not do that.
I use a lot of foundationless frames, and they will draw really small root size cells in the center, and then out towards the edge they will draw some drone, and then out at the very corners they draw really, really big and really thick if they've got the room to go and to store the honey. Yeah. So they'll draw even bigger, even thicker cells for honey than they do for drone. Let's see.
I got a question on this one. You're using the really small, are those bees more likely to go through the excluder if they've come out of the out of the small stuff? Or you don't really notice it?
That's a good question. So the queen ends up being the same size, or at least the queen isn't smaller, and the queen can't go through the excluder. I haven't noticed my bees going through a queen excluder any better than anyone else's. But you would think.
Using small cells.
I'm using 4.9, yeah. You would think that it would make a difference. I can tell a difference when I'm looking at someone else's bees. They look big to me. So the bees definitely are a noticeable difference once you get used to it. So it probably does help, but not enough. I decided 2 years ago, I think it was, I'm gonna use queen excluders this year. I usually didn't. I put them on, and I kind of forgot that I did it and got busy, and I went back out like 2 or 3 weeks later, and it's like, they're totally ignoring these boxes up above. So then I ripped them all off and didn't use any. Last year, I think I forgot about them. So
pull one out of the edge and stick up there? Will that give them an
Yes.
incentive to?
Yes, and so if you're using two deeps on the bottom and a medium on top, you can't pull a deep up into a medium. But in my situation where I'm using all mediums, absolutely, I can actually go find a honey frame or a nectar frame somewhere towards the outside of the boxes, and I can pull that up and put it in a new box, and that will entice the bees, encourage them to get into it. Yeah.
And with a pair of hives, I've used a queen excluder on one and not on the other one, just for comparison. You know, is it worth it or is it not?
So
That
that's-
doesn't always give you the right answer either, because next time it's the other way.
In my case, I usually sacrifice one medium above the two brood boxes. If it's clean, fine. If it's not, it's theirs anyway. And invariably, there's going to be brood in that box. But above that, I've never had brood in the second box.
So you don't use a queen excluder, and you consider that medium box as kind of an excluder.
It could be for the brood nest.
It's
or it might not.
sacrifice, it's just sacrifice for them, and it
Yeah.
stays on all winter.
Yep.
So my winter is two deeps in a medium.
And generally speaking, once there's honey up there, the queen generally doesn't go across honey frames and stuff. So,
Usually.
Except yours.
yeah,
Yours will go
Oh, yeah,
all the way to the
mine-
top next
right.
and go to the top box.
Just because you said that.
Sometimes the bees don't read the same books we do.
Yeah.
So can you put a medium and a deep, and does it bother them if there's a gap, or is it?
No, but they
They'll
will
fill it with
they'll
stuff.
fill it. They'll kind of follow the center of the bottom, and they'll draw down. And
Like that drone
like
brood
Phil said
chickens.
earlier, yeah, you can do that intentionally, because they'll put drone brood in there. If it's a brood nest, and cut it out.
Just don't leave it too long, because then they'll glue it all the way to the other frame, and it'll be like,
Yeah.
oh, that's a mess now.
Okay, so whose turn is it?
It's mine. I think I did not read this section, so this is the part I didn't get to clearly.
So why do I recommend that you have all your equipment assembled and ready to go early, like a month early?
Like before you get your bees?
your bees are coming next Tuesday.
And why should I have it ready?
'Cause they just
Besides
showed
being
up.
ready, I
They
have
just,
no
they
idea.
just showed up on your door, now what do you do? Oh, no.
So, until you get into beekeeping, you don't realize how varied the weather is, or how varied spring is. You know,
Mhm.
spring is here. Sometimes it's the middle of May, sometimes it's the middle of April. And when you order your bees, they're gonna tell you they're gonna be here on April 15th. And then on April 1st, you're gonna get an email that says, oh, the weather in Texas is terrible and they're gonna be 2 weeks late. Or you might get an email that says, it's hotter than heck in Texas and the bees are coming tomorrow.
Early, yeah.
So you can't predict when your bees are gonna be ready, so you really need to get your equipment ready ahead.
When you get them, like upon arrival, how soon do you need to transfer them to?
Now,
Right away.
they're too late to go to the store then.
You don't have to, but the sooner the better.
You have to.
So to put that into context though, and I will stress this over and over and over again, when you ask somebody a beekeeping question, or when you're looking at a YouTube video, you've got to figure out where they're coming from in context. So what they didn't ask you is how cold is it out when you get your bees?
What's the weather like?
What's the
Yeah.
weather?
Yeah.
Was it first
Did
thing
you
in
get
the
a
morning
package or
or
did you get
8 o'clock at night?
Yeah, so if you get your package of bees and it's 55 and sunny, yeah, put them in the next afternoon. If it's 35 or 40 and rainy, they're fine in the package for several days if you have to. You can spray sugar syrup on the outside of the package to feed them. You make sure that they're fed, put them in the garage or the back porch or somewhere, or in your basement, somewhere where it's not really, really cold. But yeah, if it's 55 and sunny, put them in the hive the next afternoon. A nuke, kind of a little bit the same, except for they're already 5 frames in a box. What I do with the nuke, I take it home and I put it on top of the hive that I'm going to install them in, a brick or something on top of it, and open up the entrance and let them fly. Don't try and transfer them right away because they might be riled up from just bringing them home.
What was the other way besides the nuke?
A package.
And they're just packaged differently than in the nuke?
That's a little bit in next week,
Okay.
but you remember the box that I had with the piece of wood in the bottom?
Yeah,
Showing you
the
how to shake
circle
the
thing,
bees out
yeah,
of
yeah.
it? That's a package.
Mhm.
So it's just the bees,
Mhm.
a queen in a cage,
Mhm.
and a can of sugar syrup. Nuke is actually 5 frames of bees, brood, honey, the whole thing. It's a small hive.
And
It's
a
got-
queen.
And a queen, laying queen. Yeah. So a nuke, you've got frames that you can move into.
They're already a colony.
Bees at every
It's a nucleus
stage.
colony,
But
it's already,
small.
they already know each other.
So, but you're putting those pieces into your hive?
Yep. So you
Yeah.
take those 5
Just
frames, you
until
put
they
them
get
in the
off?
middle of your hive and then they'll grow.
We can show you out there, but yeah, you basically take those 5 frames and you put them in the middle of your 10 frame box. Put the undrawn frames outside of them, close them up and let them go to work.
Is one way preferred over the other? Or is one better than the other?
Yes and no. It depends, yeah.
A nuke's already taking off, so it'll generally thrive, but packages are cheaper.
As Phil just pointed out, it depends on which one you can get sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't order it now, then you might have to get only a package is more likely.
Is there any more or less risk, one versus the other, with diseases and mites? Not.
That's not the problem.
Oh,
The
that
problem
is-
is
It's
that
true, because
the
it's spring.
package is going to now have to take longer.
Yeah.
to
Yep.
Because
start
they
to
have
work.
no
But it's
brood
true,
and,
it's true that a package doesn't have comb, so
But then there are stories where that package has outgrown the nuke by far sometimes
Sure.
too. So some people, if you're having 2 hives, in one package, get 1 nuke,
yeah,
it
they do.
happens.
what works.
Yeah.
So there are advantages and disadvantages to both nukes and packages. I see nukes as one of the disadvantages being you're getting somebody else's old comb.
Sure.
I see a package, one advantage being it's less likely to get disease with a package, but it's not impossible.
Yeah.
It's less likely to get mites, but it's
Still
not
carry
impossible.
spores in
Yeah.
a package.
Yeah, package, the bees could be sick, or and packages do have mites on them. I don't know actually if I've ever seen a comparison where you get less mites out of a package or less out of a nuke.
There's good and bad qualities in both, depending
Yeah.
on who's doing it too.
Your nuke is gonna be further ahead, but around here, you're gonna get the nuke a little bit later than you get a package. So, yeah, good and bad for both.
Is there a recommendation for ordering a package when we would target date later, earlier?
Well, you don't really have any control over when the packages get here, usually. It's like they're bringing them on whatever date or they're shooting for whatever date. When I got into beekeeping, somebody told me, get a package from one place and a nuke from somewhere else. Because if somebody falls through, at least you end up with one. And, you're new and you get something to compare to. And we usually recommend you start out with 2 hives anyway. So that's something to consider. So Brenda,
Yeah.
your turn. So what about protective clothing? Why do we need it? Have you looked at it? What are you thinking about buying and why?
Well, I think both Rick and I have a little different opinion. I have some higher or less tolerance to bee stings than he does. So I might go with the full suit, but then again, it's super hot, so I might go with a jacket and a jacket, veil, gloves, and
Okay.
some sort of poofy pants. So that,
And Todd Osterbrew made a really good point at the first meeting. The ventilated suits are much cooler than the regular ones. They're maybe not quite as sting proof, not that a normal suit is sting proof. But the ventilated ones are like 3 layers of mesh. And in theory, the stinger is still too far away from you to get to you.
that's kind of what it seems like, yeah.
Yeah, I have one of them. I like it a lot.
Okay.
And yeah, if, even if hat and veil is good for you most of the time, but what do you do when the bees get really upset and you still need to deal with them?
Yeah.
Move them out of somebody's property because they're hot hive and you need to go somewhere else with them. Yeah, full suit's good to have
Yeah.
at times, yeah.
Definitely start with the bee gloves, but I think we were talking about goat skin is the better option than Cow skin?
I think goat skin,
Or
you
something
can
like
feel
that?
things a little bit better,
Okay,
so yeah.
I mean, work gloves dedicated
If
for
you
bees
get
would
beekeeping
probably.
gloves, they're gonna have a long gauntlet.
Right,
Sometimes all the way up to here, everybody hates those, I don't know why they still make them,
yeah,
but they have elastic.
right, yeah, or tape them or something.
Yeah, and because I'm going to stop using gloves and just go bare hands, I just use short leather gloves, because I just need them once in a while. I end up wearing them all the time, but they work. But I don't react to stings anymore, so I'm not really concerned about when I get stung. I'm more concerned about getting too hot, so I'll usually use half veil leather gloves. Sometimes those blue, I can never remember.
Nitrile.
Nitrile, I can remember that, I don't know why, I use those quite a bit too. So anyway, so Kyle, why is a smoker essential in beekeeping, and just how do we use it? How should we use it?
Little probably goes a long way, I'm thinking, and it sounds like it somewhat confuses their pheromones.
Yep, exactly, it masks their pheromones,
That's what
makes it
they're not-
harder for them to communicate.
They don't all get mad at you, maybe,
Yep.
just some.
And then the text talks a bit about if you're reluctant to use the smoker, you should still have it, because if the hive gets really revved up and the bees come boiling out, it can take days for them to settle down and get back to business. So even if you don't want to use it, you should have it lit, have it ready in case you need it. You can't light it in a hurry.
So you're saying like every time you go to check on the bees and take care of them, have it ready?
Yes.
If you're going to open the box, have the smoker ready.
Unless you've been working with them a long time, like Phil's probably got his, he doesn't need it because his are real gentle and he's worked with
And
them.
they're all tame, he hasn't named.
50,000 of them?
But you don't want to get into it and then decide, oh, I should have lit my smoker 15 minutes ago, and it's too late. And sometimes if the bees get really wild and nasty, and depending on the weather, sometimes you just want to put the lid on or walk away and come back another day.
If you're new to it, how do you know what's normal and what's like holy wild or wild? Like,
That's going to take a while, but typically when you're looking at a beehive, let me back up. Some of the kind of stages from really, really calm to aggressive. Like the first thing is when you open up the hive, they'll look at you. And it's not defensive yet, but that's maybe like the first line. Like you'll see them lining up along the seams of the frame looking at you. And you can put a couple puffs of smoke on that, and most of them will turn around, and now they're going.
like the sign of them lining up is like a sign that they are upset.
They're watching you.
They're
And that's
aware
bad?
of you. Well, no, like I'm saying, this is like there are lots of little layers or levels from.
I see, and that's like
Okay
level
to
one or
really-
stage one or stuff.
There you go. That's like the least thing, is that they notice that you're there and they look at you.
Where do you puff smoke in before you open the hive?
Entrance?
Entrance, yeah. The guard bees are gonna be by the entrance. And those are the ones you wanna distract,
Distract.
the guard bees.
And
And then when you open them up, then you can kind of, if they're all lined up at you like they're gonna take off like a big fighter jet fleet, you just puff a little smoke and they all go down and they take care of other things. They ignore you. So
And
that's
in the
good.
spring, when you're starting and there's flowers and there's resources, and they're busy and getting
Yeah.
going, they're pretty much gonna stick on their frame
Yep.
and be there.
they'll ignore you.
It's, if they get riled up from, like we talked about, skunks or something rattling them at night,
Yep.
or you get into the fall time when you're ready to take honey off, and they wanna keep their honey for the winter, then they might be a little bit more aggressive, time for the suit and the gloves.
But the most challenging when there's nothing to eat in nature.
Sure.
Yeah.
They're a little anxious, you can tell.
So that next level of them, next step towards aggression is when you reach across the hive to grab the frame. If a few bees fly towards your hand, or just take the hive tool over there, and bees shoot right up. You'll hear them, you'll feel them ting off of the hive tool. So that's, maybe a little more aggressive. This isn't always aggressive, but usually when you have a frame of bees out, they're moving fairly slow. Sometimes we call them running bees. That's not always a sign of aggression, but to me, it's like I start paying more attention when I see running bees. The next thing is, if you have more than 2 or 3 bees checking you out, if you've got like a lot of bees checking you out, and then the next thing is they'll fly at your eyes, and you've got the veil on, so they'll be bouncing off of your veil. So if you've got bees bouncing off of your veil, that's where I start paying a lot of attention. And if you got a lot of bees bouncing off of your veil, pretty soon there's going to be.
Put it together and be done with it.
Yeah, there you go. It's time to be done with it.
That they can, for instance, if it's gonna storm in 2 hours and the clouds are 50 miles away, they can almost tell that.
Yeah.
If you're trying to get into your hive in the afternoon and I wanna do a quick check, they know the storm's coming through before you do.
Yeah, and they get grouchy before storm, like, especially a quick one that rolls in. It's like, even before you know it's coming, they will be grouchy. I've noticed that too.
You just need to get them little bee shutters so you can see when they just start coming across the shutters.
And when you actually separate your box, you just wave your hand over there. And if they fly at your hand, okay, a little more smoke.
Do what you did.
Yeah.
And when you're taking your boxes apart or something with your hive tool, when it'll pop with that propolis on there, it's like glue breaking apart. Those kinds of noises and jerkiness and stuff.
Sudden movements they don't like. So try to be as smooth as possible. Do yoga while you're doing your bees. And you'll be good.
You know what, that's weird that you should say that. I always think that like a yoga instructor would make a perfect beekeeper.
exactly.
Because that's
Smooth-
really the
smooth
way you
motions.
want to be moving and looking at it when you're in the beehive or bee garden. No sudden movements, and even taking a frame out. and putting
Pry
it
it
back.
slow and take it off slow. Yeah, we're good. We like you.
So, I think it's your turn, Amy. Why do we recommend that you light the smoker, practice lighting the smoker before you get your bees?
So that you know how to do it. You're prepared.
Yeah, so the day that you get your bees, lighting a smoker and keeping it lit is trickier than it seems. Yes, it is. And I should probably stress that in the text more. Like, this looks easy, it isn't. And the other thing is the torch. The torch is so much easier to light them than matches or cigarette lighter or kindling or anything else that you might have planned. So, yeah. And then when you first get your bees and you're getting ready to put them in the hive, that's the first time you're gonna light your smoker, right? Or the first time you're gonna need it.
You got enough to be worried about.
You've got enough to be worried about. You don't want to learn how to run the smoker that day. Fire extinguisher. Anybody else planning on having one handy?
Sounds like a good idea.
So,
I don't need to be the volunteer fireman.
was it Ron Reinders that was doing an oxalic acid vaporization
Oh, boy.
and set the hive on fire?
Burned his hive,
Oh,
right?
no.
So it can happen. There are definitely ways. And then the other thing is, most of our bees are out in a pasture or somewhere, or dry grass or something. Once the fire gets started, it's not a great place.
I usually have a jug of water with me or something, or a lot of times I
What's
have
causing
a
this?
shovel in my truck that I can do it.
Yeah, dig it. Yeah.
Oh, the smoker.
Very
Gotcha.
hot.
Yeah, so that's a good question. We talked a little bit last week about smokers and different smoker fuels. And like Dean mentioned, because Dean uses wood chips, and you always put a wad of grass on top of that, right?
Try to, yeah.
Try to. So until you've practiced with your smoker, you wouldn't know that wood chips, I use wood shavings or pine needles. All of those will tend to burn fairly fast, and sometimes sparks will come out when you go to put smoke. So the grass at least will keep the sparks from coming out. And when you're standing over a hive with the smoker, especially it's too deep, put some smoke in it. Guess what? You tip the smoker down, and embers can fall right out. So if you're going to use wood chips or wood shavings or pine needles, always put dry grass on top, or not dry grass, wet grass on top. You might get by with some burlap until it catches on fire. So that's something to think about.
And you see the mesh or the screen around the outside of the canister there? That was only keeping you from touching that thing, that hot canister. The bottom of it is damn near red hot. So if you set that down in the grass, you can easily set the grass on fire.
Or if you set it on the tailgate of your truck and you got
Oh,
plastic
yeah,
lying around.
Yeah. Yeah, so you have to be aware of what's happening with the smoker.
So a
It
cinder
is
block next to the hives to set your smoker.
What's another reason why you want to practice? Because you want actually cool smoke coming out of it. You want to be able to puff on your wrist and not burn yourself. 'Cause
Sure.
otherwise, you're going to cook your bees.
Yeah,
So you get a little ember of smoke, and then you put a lot of fuel on top of it, so it's not hot when it's puffing.
full of smoke now.
And that takes practice. I mean, 5 years into it, I'm just like, smoker went out, still, like, I'm still trying to figure it out, so. it's like-
Where I started it, it's going good, and then I go get my other tools or put my gloves on.
And it's like
then
dead,
what
it's
happened?
like, what happened to my smoker? So
Yep, that still happens to me too.
work just, and so you want to make sure it's there before you get into your bees, because the worst thing to do is like, you got stuff and like, no smoke, uh-oh,
And as you're working, you
keep
know,
puffing it,
there you go. You don't need it. The bees are fine.
keep puffing it, because that keeps
Puff
it
it every
going.
now and then, because yeah, it'll go out on you. And it's, you get towards the tail end of the inspection and all of a sudden you need it and you let it go out. That happens pretty easily. And yeah, it takes a little while to figure out, okay, you got to get a good hot fire going in the bottom first, then add a whole bunch of stuff on top so that you have smoke, not fire. Yeah. Not as easy as it.
Now, another suggestion that I have is, I have I've attached a small chain on there with a cork on it. Plug the end of it, which smothers it when you want to shut it off.
They're
If you don't,
moving through it.
if you don't, it will smoke for the next 5 hours. And your garage or shed or wherever you put it is gonna be full of smoke.
I was gonna ask about that.
Yeah, I take a wad of grass and make a little plug and
Yeah.
just shove it in there.
I put a cork in mine, so one other thing, if you lay a smoker on its side, it will go out. But you'd have to have a metal box or something that you could protect it and do that. I put a cork in the end of it, and then the whole thing fits down in a trash can, a metal trash can that's about that tall. So it kind of shuts off some of the air, and it keeps the hot smoker away from anything that bust hole in my truck. And until it stops smoking, the smoke is in that trash can. I started out with a hobby smoker that would actually fit in an Army ammo can. And they're airtight. So once you get it closed in that, it's done. But,
I only use the big tall ones, because like, those little ones just don't last
You
long.
got more than 2 hives to
Yeah,
go
just like-
into.
And it's easier to keep them going too, if you got this much fuel, it just, it'll burn for a while.
Just start the smoker at least 5 minutes before you're gonna start. Don't expect it to
Yeah, do,
just ignite right away and then start using it, because you're gonna set it down and then 30 seconds later it's out. So get it going well before you need it.
So
Alright.
Brenda, what did you learn about varroa mites today?
All of the things.
They made me itch, like we were talking about head lice or something. That's like, I started to get like, ew.
Yeah. They exponentially reproduce as the colony does, but lagged slightly behind. They cause both stress and disease introduction to the colony.
Oh, very good. Broad question. I didn't want to reiterate all of it. Kyle, tell us a little bit about the varroa mites reproductive cycle and how they time things with the bees.
Seems like a female drops in with the larva or at the egg stage, and then
Larva stage.
just
Right.
drops off a whole bunch of eggs, or has a male and then a whole bunch of females.
Yeah.
Each cell.
Yep,
You go to town.
definitely getting there. So yeah,
sneak in right before it's capped generally.
yeah, right before it's capped. So it's a larva, but it's about to pupate. So it's about to become a pupa. They do all of their reproduction underneath that capped cell. First egg that she lays is a male, so that one's got some time to develop. Then she starts laying female eggs. This is really weird. The females mate with the male inside that cell, and if it's just one mite, it's their brother. You would think that genetically we could wipe these mites out really easy because they're inbred. Unless there's two mites, two foundress mites, two female mites, then there's a chance that they're not inbred. For the most part, they're inbred, but it's weird. It doesn't phase them at all. And yeah, usually a couple of different texts, they say like 4 to 6. She'll lay 4 to 6 eggs. I think what's more likely is she lays a few more eggs, but because the bee emerges after 12 days, there's only 4 to 6 mites that develop into adulthood and come out. What about drone brood?
What about the drone brood?
Think about drone brood and varroa mites. What's different?
I actually don't understand the whole brood thing. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
No, not at
If you
all.
just told me what that is, I'd probably answer. I didn't understand it when you.
So brood is what any. Let's see how to define this.
Any part of the cycle from laying an egg to a bee emerges.
The whole
out is-
cycle's called the brood?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
So
So
the
what was
eggs,
it?
the
Yeah.
larva, the pupas.
Yeah, the egg, the larva, the pupa, it's all brood, and then they usually do that in those bottom 2 boxes, so we call that the brood chamber, or a brood frame, if you're talking about just one frame. So, what I was asking about, what's the difference between a drone brood or a worker brood, and what I'm getting at is drones take about 3 days longer. So if the mite is in that capped cell laying eggs the whole time, and the drone takes 3 days longer, that's, if she's doing one egg a day, that's 3 more eggs that she can lay. That's 3 more adult mites that can come out of that cell.
Plus they leave the hive and spread it to
So
other
there's-
hives, right?
Yep, they can tag along with the bee and get on another bee or get into another hive. And the drones will, if the drone has got a mite on it and drifts to another hive, it'll take the mite with it.
Yeah, honeybees they call it a complete cycle. They have egg, larva, pupa. So some insects only, have a nymph but the cycle in honeybees is egg, larva, pupa, adult, just like a butterfly.
And that whole thing you're saying is called, that is.
That's the brood. Yep.
And then when you're talking about your beehives, like all the different compartments, I guess that's how, like, is that on the bottom? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Or, okay.
Brood is usually on the bottom, because we use queen excluders or we do things to keep the queen down there, but yeah, typically the brood's in the bottom 2 boxes.
And it's usually in the center where the bees can get around and keep it warm.
Keep it warm.
On the outside frames in that brood box, we'll usually have food or honey or pollen and stuff.
Bees tend to put their brood close to the entrance because they gotta get the pollen right in there and all of that sort of thing. So there are beekeepers that drill like entrances all the way up and down. And actually then that kind of spreads the brood too much and that's one thing that I learned the hard way. If I just have one entrance down there and only a little bit of ventilation at the top, they usually keep their brood down there and that's when I don't have to care about.
But
any
like,
exclusion.
is it running, I just I don't, I need to look at them to understand it, but are we talking this way?
Frames.
Okay,
Yep,
yeah,
yep,
okay,
yep.
not this way.
Right, they're the frames.
Yeah.
10 frames or 8 frames.
And then, so when you talk about the opening, you're saying the side that one is
The
on for the
entrance
brood.
at the bottom, brood is close to that entrance at the bottom of the hive. They'll generally seem to put their brood by their entrance.
This picture just looks different because it's
It's
laying
flipped on the
horizontal
side,
instead of
yeah.
Yeah.
vertically.
You
You
can
know.
see in the
This is
honeycomb.
vertical, really.
Yeah, that's a good point. This is not oriented like it would be in the hive.
Frames are like this in the box.
Mhm.
Here, we're looking at it this way.
So, I think it's your turn. When do mite levels reach critical levels, and can you tell us why?
Usually in the fall, because they lag behind the brood just slightly. And then as the bees are declining to go into hibernation or whatever the correct term for that is, the mites are too high for the bee level.
So our ratio gets
Yeah.
way higher, because there's same number of mites, but fewer bees. So there's more mites per 100 or per whatever bees.
And then can I follow up? with
Yeah,
one?
absolutely.
So why is it a good idea to also sample in the spring?
To see what you're starting with?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Because if you start with, the higher you start with in the spring, the worse it's gonna be
Yeah.
later too.
Okay.
So you kind of want to knock them down so they don't grow as fast
Before you
And
get honey.
before you
Because
get honey.
can't treat during honey.
Well, most treatments you don't want to, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
A few you're allowed to, but yeah.
Okay.
so I threw this together recently. I added the varroamide section to this. I don't know if you all saw all of this, but, you know, for instance, if you're looking at 800 total mites in the hive in May, that's, 3.6 per 100 bees. That's, for most people, they wouldn't treat. But look what that reaches by September. I mean, it's just 51 mites per 100 bees. That started out as 3.6. If you could treat in April,
Goes down.
and this was only 400 or 100, think of how much that would lower the numbers in the fall. So yeah, it was for quite a while, people were recommending 3% was the threshold. Am I right there? If
Used
you're
to be.
over 3%, you treat. If you're under 3% or at 3%, you don't need to. Bee Informed Partnership, specifically in the last couple of years, has decided if you're at 3% in April or May, you
It's too
better
high
treat
for the
that.
spring.
Yeah, it's too high. Yeah, so, and different people use different thresholds, but it's important to look at what time of year. If I check my hives in September and I've got 6%, I don't know, that doesn't seem too bad considering most others are 51% by September. So maybe I won't treat if it's 6% in September. Everything
That's a
else
bad
looks good.
winter.
Yeah,
I
Yeah.
would.
and that's the other thing. So what's, why is it important, or what's going on in the beehive when these mite levels are high in the fall? What are the bees doing?
I'll add that this discussion about the varroa mites, and I don't think we can emphasize too much how important this is and how relatively new this is.
The
Historically,
mites?
if you look at the historic, read about beekeeping in history,
Before
they
the
didn't have
1990s,
varroa
they
mites.
didn't have to.
They
worry.
weren't worried about any of this. This is all new stuff in the past 30 years that we are now dealing with. And there is very little in the way of answers or developments coming along. And that's what's frustrating to me, is there hasn't been a systemic solution yet. No vaccine to take care of this, the pest problem.
There's no silver bullet.
There's only
Treatments help, but they don't help near as much as what we're trying to do.
Right, bug on a bug.
Yeah, seems like they can develop resistance really quickly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And beekeeping used to be a romantic, occupation.
So-
Sit and
you can still
raise all kinds of bees and
Well, it's still
make all
romantic.
kinds of honey almost everywhere.
So what Dave's referring to, in the bee club, there are still some beekeepers who started beekeeping before varroa mites, earlier than the 1990s. And you'll read this too, beekeepers who were keeping bees back then and are still keeping bees say, it's a night and day difference. Beekeeping was easy back then. We didn't have all of these things that were killing our bees all of the time. And now it's a constant struggle. So you're getting in on the hard part. Yeah, about somewhere in the 1990s is when the varroa jumped.
Tracheal was in the 80s, so it's the people who were before the 80s,
Before the
they
80s.
really
Yeah.
are sad about the good old days not being here anymore.
And I haven't talked too much or mentioned even tracheal mites. But yeah, tracheal mites came along in the 80s and they were killing all of the bees. I took my beginning beekeeping class at University of Nebraska. Marion Ellis taught the class and had been the head of the entomology department forever. And he said that when tracheal mites came around, academically, he was looking for something to hang his hat on, and he decided he's going to cure the tracheal mites. He's going to find something that, treat the tracheal mites and save the bees. And before he could figure anything out, the bees adapted, and the tracheal mites don't bother him anymore.
Genetics.
They cope with it. And we've never gotten there with varroa mites. more aggressive, they're more adapting. We did find treatments and they worked for a while, and then like you suggested, the mites got resistant to the treatments, those don't work anymore, so now we're using a different set of chemicals.
Is this mite, just something that it bothers the honeybees, or if it's something like, if the honeybee were to go to like my goats or my chickens, or, you know?
No, good question. As far as we know, they don't bother anything else, not even any other bees. Like even, the native mason bees, bumblebees. There are some diseases that'll cross over. I think chalkroot is one of them that the other bees can be affected by. No, varroa mites don't bother anything else. Kyle, did you figure it out? What are the bees doing? What at that time of the year when the mites are so
They
high?
are raising bees that are going to last all winter,
Right.
so they need to be sturdy and
Right.
not
Oh, yeah.
burdened by all the mites.
Yep, so the bees that are raising them have been haggard by mites. The bees that they're trying to raise are also being fed on by mites. And that's a really good explanation to why do our bees keep dying in the winter. They're not as healthy as they could be or as they should be going into winter. And let's see.
Yeah, that's why you really want to knock them down in August, because those are going to be the parents of the bees in September and October. They're going to last all the winter. So
So Bee Informed Partnership here again, last year, the survey estimated from April 1st to April 1st, we lost 48.2% of managed honeybees over the year. So that's almost 50%. And for the 12 years that they've been doing the study, it's averaged 39.6%. So that's not all a bunch of new beekeepers. That's not all a bunch of people who refuse to treat. That's a really large group of beekeepers, a lot of commercial beekeepers included, who know what they're doing and who are treating, and they're still averaging a loss of around 40%. So you won't be any exception. You're going to lose bees, and winter is when most of that happens, but they actually track winter and summer losses, and it happens all year long. This is something that's not available out there anymore, but this shows the winter losses. Yeah, winter losses for people who use treatment versus people who did not use treatment. And you can see the people who weren't treating for mites had a significantly higher loss over the winter. Did you all get a chance to watch the video?
It didn't pop up on the slides for me for some reason, but
Oh.
I think I understand the concept of
Is
it.
this, I don't think I saw this when I watched the other ones where you pulled the hives out. I don't think I saw, I don't know if I saw
Okay.
this one.
You want to watch it
Yeah,
now?
well, how
Okay.
long is it?
It's about, what is it, 12 minutes? We can sure watch
At
it,
least 10,
at least 10.
I think. Oh, 10:09.
10, yep.
Today, I'm checking my hives for varroa mites,
Can you hear that?
and I wanted to shoot a quick video to show you how you can do that. I have a few things here that you will need to use to check for mites. First thing is just a regular mason jar. It's got to be a wide mouth, and then I've taken the ring, cut a piece of 1/8" hardware cloth to fit the jar.
he's using that instead of one of these kits.
Oh,
You
okay.
scoop up a 1/2 cup of bees. You're going to put them in the mason jar, put this lid on. The bees won't be able to get out through the hardware cloth. And then you can use rubbing alcohol, or I'm using windshield washer fluid. Pour that on the bees. This is going to unfortunately kill the bees, but you'll stir it around and it'll wash the mites off of the bees. Then what I've got is just a white styrofoam bowl, and I'll pour the alcohol into the bowl. The bees will stay up above, the mites will end up in this bowl. And since it's white, it's fairly easy to see the mites up against the white background. In order to get the bees into the jar, this Rubbermaid tub works pretty well. You just take a frame of bees, knock them into the tub. Then you can use this inch cup to scoop up a half inch of bees. Somebody has done this multiple times and counted, and they say that a half cup of bees is roughly 300 bees. So you have an idea of how many bees you get in each sampling. Something else that's handy if you're going to do several washes in a row, if you have a second jar and a strainer, you can pour the windshield washer fluid through this, the mites won't go through, and you can reuse your washing solution. I already have a frame of bees here. It's important to look for a brood frame because the varroa mites are mostly concentrated in the brood nest. They're going to be on the nurse bees. They're not going to be so many mites on the field bees. As you can see, this is a pretty decent frame of capped brood on this side.
See, I do have some deep
If
frames.
you can, it's nice to find one that's mostly emerging brood.
Is this you?
Didn't really find one
Oh,
today.
okay.
The other side of this frame has some eggs and open brood and some capped brood, so
Because the new guy
it's
sold
pretty
me
decent
the.
frame for this sampling. And there's more than enough bees on this frame to get my half cup. Definitely want to make sure you look the frame over thoroughly and make sure that your queen is not on this frame, because the bees that you end up sampling are going to die, and the last thing you want is to kill your queen. What I usually do is take the frame and knock it into this tub. The first thing you'll notice when I do that is quite a few of the bees fly up, and those bees will fly back to the hive. They're field bees, they know where the hive is at, and it's actually an advantage because we don't want so many field bees in our sampling. Again, we want nurse bees. So when I knock the frame and the bees fly up, that's good. They'll fly back to the hive. Their field bees will get them out of our way. Most of what stays in this tub are nurse bees. And then once you get them in the tub, you can shake it around and spread them out or just let them walk around. It gives you another opportunity to double check and make sure that the queen is not in this frame. So I'm going to go ahead and knock the frame into the tub.
Not as many bees freaking out as you would expect, are there?
Not a lot of bees flew away. So there's a lot of nurse bees on this frame.
Quite a few.
I will put
Yeah, a
these
couple of
bees
cups.
back in the hive when I'm done. There's definitely more bees than what I need for my sampling. And now I'm double checking, making sure the queen's not in it. Maybe we'll stir some of them up and let some of those fly back to the hive, because there's more bees in that sampling than what I really need. I'll give them a little time, let them spread out a little bit. Makes it easier for me to double check and make sure the queen is not in there. This measuring cup fits in the corner of the tub fairly well. So it's pretty easy. Take the tub and knock the bees down into that corner. And then scoop up your half cup. And you can even level it off a little bit. There's no sense in getting more than you have to have. Now I'm going to put them in the jar. Put that lid on top. This is just regular windshield washer fluid that you would use in the wintertime,
This
the
is,
type that won't
during the
freeze.
pandemic, you could
It's
not
not
buy
as
alcohol.
flammable as rubbing alcohol,
I
so it's a
won't
little
use
safer
windshield
to
washer
use.
fluid anymore. 'Cause it
I like
doesn't
to
kill
knock
them
the
very
bees to the
fast.
bottom of the jar. I'd like to kill them as quickly as possible so they don't have to suffer. And then just pour that in.
I always have a portable table and I do this so I'm not doing it on top of the hive.
Yeah, that's an empty hive.
That's
there.
Oh, okay, okay. Look,
That's a good point.
you don't want to spill alcohol over your.
If this was a powdered sugar wash, this is for the amount of time that you're supposed to do this. For alcohol wash or windshield washer fluid, I think 30 seconds is probably enough. But you just as well make sure that you do it thoroughly, you've killed all the bees. You just as well make sure that you agitate things enough that the varroa mites are actually coming off of the bees, and you'll get a good sampling.
I think the thing that you buy has got instructions on the box. I think they recommend 60 seconds.
Mine's an hour car ride home, so should have them all down there.
Then the next step, pour the alcohol and the mites off. Again, the bees will all be held back by this hardware cloth. And to make sure that you really get the mice out, you actually want to shake. And I've heard some people say that they shake for several minutes until they finally get the last of the mites out.
It doesn't get any better from here because I don't actually find any mites in this hive,
Oh, no.
Which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Some people will take this sample when they're done and put it in a Ziploc bag and freeze it. And in the wintertime, they'll go back through it, maybe count the bees to see if they got 300, see if there's any mites that they missed.
Dean, you used to save
Another
yours
thing
and
you
count them
can do
later.
is-
You still do that? You used to save yours and count them later.
Yeah, when I didn't have anything else.
I was gonna say, man.
I'd sit there, dump them out and have a little, pick type thing and I don't know, 284 or 336.
On your favorite classical music and just count bees.
I remember getting
I
those
could give that to my
results.
kids to do.
I remember getting your
That's a
results one
punishment.
time though.
Yeah,
You know, some of them were,
Behavior, don't count bees.
some of them were 325 bees and like one of them was like 200 and something. So it's like,
so here's your half cup, sometimes it's good.
yeah.
And the thing is, they all stick together. When they're at the end, it's just like when they festoon across and their legs are touching
Oh,
and
their
they're
legs
leaking.
stick together.
So you're pulling 3 at a time or 6 at a time.
So since there weren't any in the video, here's a few pictures of.
Hopefully they actually saw a couple.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, this is a little bit fuzzy, but the shape and the color is what really clues you in. That,
So does this warrant, trade, or is this considered not very much, because it doesn't look like
No.
very much to me.
So what you can do,
Why is it yellow?
because they've been sitting there for 3 months,
Oh,
I don't know if it's honey or just, the color of the bees, it just seems to come off in the alcohol.
so
Oh, so
you
more
can just, then you could just look down and
Look down from the top.
down from the top, just don't spill that everywhere.
that's.
Smell it's
smells like-
alcohol.
Yeah.
Yep.
But this shape, look at, on my
So
fingers.
there's 2 little round
That-
ones.
Oh,
It's a
that's
pretty
it?
distinct shape.
That-
once you
that's
get
not
used
a-
All
to
those
it.
little dark things are not them?
No,
Oh,
those are just like debris
What
and
are-
stuff.
Exactly.
ones are
the
them?
Debris.
You get debris and
random
things like, so
shapes.
you gotta look for those little
Yep.
ovals, so even
Well, I
even
don't-
having a magnifying glass might be helpful.
Yep,
Yeah.
I
magnifying
don't
glass
see
is
them.
good, or your camera on your phone.
Sure.
Everybody's got a cell phone in their pocket.
So
All you
those
do is
other
take a
few are
picture and
not
No,
zoom.
right,
mice?
yep. So
like
one,
that one
Pour
and that
alcohol
one?
And that one.
on,
Oh,
Two mice.
just gotta
geez, you
have a
kind
layer
of
of
end up
on.
getting an eye for it and
Yep,
figuring
yep.
it out.
Yeah, Phil, let them see that.
Oh,
Because, yeah, it's like you said, once you get an eye for it, or once you
Yeah.
develop, that's just
Well, I was
junk.
even like thinking, when you're talking about the bees and when to use the smoke and that, like, I just was like, picturing it like me with my roosters. That's how I was like, you'll learn to read them. Like I can read them.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You will, absolutely, yeah. So I mentioned I don't use windshield washer fluid anymore. I've started using 1 to 2 tablespoons of Dawn dishwashing liquid in a gallon of water.
How's that work for you?
I like
tried
it.
Once, I hated it.
It kills the bees right away. it makes a bunch of foam. So
And I couldn't shake anything.
well, I shook the hell out of them, and I even used it like a wash machine. I took the yellow thing off the top and spun the white thing. It's like, oh, this is great. But you had to read it from the bottom. You get that much foam on top. And yeah, you've got it. And so like a magnifying mirror, or you hold them up to the sun. It's a little hard to count them, but I don't like having alcohol around my smoker. You know, it's just an accident waiting to happen. So I really like the Dawn dishwashing liquid in the water.
And I hate it.
Yeah, I don't prefer alcohol. Now, like I said, I fill all mine before I go out there, so.
Okay, so next week, get through session 4, Google Slides. And then there is also, we're not gonna get to it tonight, but hopefully we can get to it next week. I've got some Google Slides in the same place. There's a link to it that's normal or abnormal. And it's basically pictures of brood. And like you were saying,
Yeah.
you learn how to read until you've seen normal like 1,000 times, you can't really recognize abnormal. So start going through these pictures and start kind of getting a bit of an idea of a normal frame of brood compared to abnormal. That's pretty obvious that there's, that's chalk brood. And it's obvious to us, this is pretty normal, but you guys don't know yet. This is abnormal, this is European fall brood. So look those over in addition to going through the session 4 slides. Any questions on anything? Okay. So Dean has got some stuff out in the atrium. And
You want to
Dave,
just
you've
show
got some
them
stuff.
westerbees.com in case anybody wants to just see it. I got some videos too, in case you just kind of want to go to somewhere. It's just my last name,
Help me out here, WTF.
STRA. Bees. So hopefully that works here. So I've got, if you go to photos and videos, you can watch some stuff.
Where are you?
Center?
Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
East north.
North, okay.
I'm northwest corner of Iowa Hill. So it's just lighting a smoker and looking at brood, and this was actually an observation hive. I've got videos of the queen laying eggs,
Oh, cool. I thought that might be what she was
Yeah.
doing.
so I have that behind glass.
Huh.
Just a few things in case you're curious.
So westrabees.com.
Yep.
So I just feel like, I mean, I don't know if this is something we'll do or not, but that's why we're here. But if I don't have, like if I have cornfields, bean fields, whatever they're planting around my property, is that just like not a good idea to even consider
It can be.
bees, you know?
I looked where you live and Todd Oscar's got bees just half mile north of you.
Yeah. Oh, so you're saying that's good
Yeah.
or bad?
His are doing okay there.
Yeah, so what I do is I look on Google Maps and then just kind of draw a 2-mile circle around you and ask what's in there. You know, and there's, might be a lot of
There's a
ditches.
registration thing.
Yeah.
where It shows where they're at, and I saw Todd's were north of.
How many do you want?
Which
Okay, okay.
isn't so terrible bad, but, you know, he's got other places to go, and
Sometimes even looking on Google Maps and driving around, it's still hard to tell until you put bees there.
Yep.
I've got an acreage between Willis and Ponca that I thought would be a great place for bees. And that's where I started, and it took me like 3 or 4 years of beekeeping to decide this just isn't a good place. There's just cornfields and bean fields and not a lot of variety. And like I'm driving out there and there's wildflowers blooming in the road.
Well, I
ditch.
don't-
But you go to where Dwayne Byma lives.
Yeah.
He's got 20 hives and they actually do pretty good. He's
And
got
that's
corn
why
and beans
mine are
around his.
just
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, I
So,
mean, because
yeah.
I can, like, if I were gonna, I mean, I could probably be a better flower farmer than I could a bee person. But I feel like, so I feel like that is something that will definitely like I could have that on the property, like, the food for them, the nectar and all, their pollen, but, I would just, my concern would be the farmer spraying and then, of course, that's probably just one thing, it's probably the other things that you showed up on here that are the mites and the moisture and so it just sounds like a lot.
Well,
And don't
So-
forget that they get half their food from trees.
Yeah.
so there,
Well,
There's-
did you know, like,
there's
we
just
live
any
by the
trees
river,
around,
kind
yeah.
of by the river.
Yeah.
Probably within a couple
Their
miles.
first pollen in the spring is from maple buds.
But see, then there's some over at the airport too. Airport,
Really?
besides just, well, you're north of town.
Yeah.
Okay, and then there's some others over on 75 out there by the implement dealers that have these too, that's registered, that I see hives and stuff, so.
There's a bunch of hives like right on Allison there, behind the airport, I think.
I'm talking about Lamar's airport.
Oh, never mind. But yes, Sioux City, yeah.
so you're right, there's a lot of things out there working against them, or a lot
Yeah,
of things to
that's
worry
what I'm
about.
thinking.
But one of your jobs or one of your goals is to minimize or put the odds in your favor. So yeah, if you can get them farther away from the cornfields and the beet fields, or some trees or some kind of buffer, so that when they spray, you know, the bees
Yeah.
aren't real close to it, that's gonna help.
Mhm.
Yeah, you keep a check on your mites to keep them down, that's gonna help.
Mhm.
If you can plant things for the bees to work on your property,
Yeah.
that's gonna help. Provide water real close so they don't
Yeah,
have to work so
that's
hard for it. All of these things,
Yeah,
you're just
it's
trying to stack the odds in
Yeah.
your favor.
Mhm.
They'll find food.
Yes,
Is
they
there
will.
any recommendations, like, you should not have it this close to your house? Or does that not matter?
Doesn't really matter, but I mean, if you've
Unless
got
you're just
kids,
worried about it in general.
yeah, you don't want the kids walking out the back door and the bees are right there.
But if I don't
every
like one of my kids, then it's probably okay.
You think bees will kind of have a flight path, so you don't want to be walking in their flight.
Yeah,
It's best to put them in
yeah, that's the
a corner
thing.
somewhere.
And I have,
Or put them there and then put something that's a barrier right there, and then they can't like fly straight out. They have to go up somewhere else.
Yeah,
mine are out by the garden, but they're,
well, see, that's,
you know, you still have them by the back door, you know.
yeah,
When I started, mine are all 200 feet away from my house, and I had 24 colonies right there. So
not fun.
we got stung every now and then, but not very
Yeah.
often.
You ready?
No, I put all that stuff away so we can go through that next week because it's getting kind of late for stuff now. I have a presentation here Monday, so I'll
Okay.
use it then and just leave it there.
And just
for-
leave it? Yeah,
next
okay, yeah. Yeah, let's, at the very least, let's go through that hive. Maybe has some questions or weren't real clear, let's go through the demonstration hive David, you take that for a minute?
Yep.
It's not working. I'm already telling, never mind.
So what you want to do is you want to make sure it's kind of cool, and then you actually go right up and just make sure the smoke goes in there. If you do this and just blows out, you haven't really,
Because it'll.
the guard bees are in here, so
Phil, do that again.
Get a little bit of them in there.
Do that again one more time.
So yeah, when you got the smoke, I always kind of make sure it's not burning. Then I actually put it right up and just.
Did
Right
you notice
across
the
the
difference between how hard he puffed it out here and how gentle?
Yeah,
That's more gentle, he puffed it in the hive.
Yep.
You don't need to puff it like that right up in there.
Right, you don't need to sit here and go.
Yeah.
And then lets it seep out, like that's way too much smoke. That's gonna make them angry, actually, not calm,
mhm.
so.
Okay, so you got smoke to the entrance, now what?
What-
Open the lid and we'll see what's
This?
inside. Yeah. Which should come off pretty easily.
Yep, that should come on.
Where do you
And
want
here's
this?
the thing that I do with this. I'll put this right there. Okay, I'll show you a little bit later when we get into this.
Okay,
So,
this is the next layer you take off?
yep,
That's usually stuck down with propolis.
So yeah, that's a good time.
Oh,
You
like
should-
between here and
So
here?
the-
that's-
so this
which
is where
we
you want
won't
the
have
hive
a clean excluder on there
Right.
right now.
So this is why I mentioned that the inner cover makes it easier because you can do that. You can't do that with the telescoping
Right,
cover.
right. And my recommendation is put your hand on there and just do it smooth. Don't pop it.
As in-
If you go like that, then they're like, if you put your hand on it and then just smooth like that, they'll be like, oh,
I feel like
hi.
this is such an adrenaline rush.
The other thing you're gonna wanna do is stand over there.
If you're gonna do, like, you don't want to be blocking, this is, like I said, the
These
flight
are
path.
gonna be going in and out.
So you don't want to stand here and block them. You want to kind of be this corner or that corner there.
To that backside.
Okay,
So, but anyway, I stick it here and then I think about prying it up. This pops it. This can be really smooth. And if you are like that, they will like,
You'll have
oh,
bees on
cool,
there.
they're all covered in bees.
You might have a whole line of heads with eyeballs
Yeah.
sticking up there looking at you.
And you always make sure you don't have the queen, you glance at it sometime, you know, you don't want the queen there because you don't want to like. Go like that and there goes the queen, you know, so, yeah.
so now what?
Well, as you're gonna go through the hive, if you're looking at this, this kind of shows where the brood nest is, where all the babies are. So out here on the side is where there's gonna be honey and stuff, not so many bees. So you're gonna wanna take these frames out from the side first, which you can use this tool and stick it in there like that and lift that up on both sides. Pull that out.
So this one has the brood,
No,
the ones in the middle have.
yes. So
And the
this is
outside's
probably
the-
just honey and not very many bees on it.
So, but you're taking that out?
Yeah, because now we're gonna wanna look at the next one.
Okay, so take that out?
Well, look at it. Can you see it?
There's nothing in there, Dean.
Okay, take it out.
I don't, is it this?
Well, you don't have to do that now.
Oh, now, but,
You could put it like this and then use it like a lever and pull apart to loosen it up, because that air cover that was all glued down,
Mhm.
all these springs are gonna be glued down
Gotcha,
all the way
like
along.
sticky.
there.
Yep, they stick them all together.
all right,
We got 2 frames out, no bees on it.
That's not
Maybe.
really flash.
Well, there might be and there might not be, but the queen generally is gonna be probably in the middle there. So then what are we looking for? Why are we looking in this hive?
We want to look at the brood.
Okay, usually you wanna have a reason to get in there
Mhm.
and to look at the brood is a good reason.
Okay.
So then we'll go and move the next one. We don't really have to take the next, well, we can take the next one out, but
but
we
you
can
could
look
just
at
start
it.
scooting them
We
apart.
could look at it like that, it's okay, we'll get the next one. So if the
Like,
queen
what are
happens
we
to be
looking
on
for,
here,
just anything that looks wrong?
right. Looking for larvae. The little white
Yeah.
C-shaped things.
Mhm,
You won't see the eggs very well,
mhm,
because they're so tiny.
mhm.
You'll see calf brood, which you won't see any bees, because it's all covered up. But if you see those little larvae in different stages, the little tiny ones, the bigger ones that fill the whole cell, you'll know that the queen has laid eggs in there. If there isn't any larvae in there, then what?
Then what do you do?
Well,
What's it mean?
what happened to the queen? Because there's no real young larva. Then you have an issue that you're gonna have to,
But at what point do you have to check all of them or?
not necessarily, you can if you want to. You probably will when you're new. I want to see what all these look like.
Yeah, when you start, you're getting used to doing all this.
Yeah.
So go ahead and go through your hive and learn it. Later on, you'll open it, you'll say, look like they got enough room, you'll pull one frame out, show there's eggs, you're done.
So if they don't have enough room, if you don't have enough room, then you need another one.
Yeah, so if like they're full.
Let's take that top
Is
box
that what
off.
you're saying, like they go from here to here?
Yeah,
So
Is this the same thing?
We'll fill it.
So we'll take this-
cavity, yep.
you'll want to get your hive tool in this corner.
Are these gonna be
with this-
sticky too?
yep.
Yeah.
Yep, because it'll really be stuck out, so you want to kind of break that.
That
loose.
same stuff that.
Yeah.
So what you want, this is what we want this cover for,
To put this on top?
You know, you'll want to use the handle.
Oh, gotcha.
because it's gonna weigh 50, 60 pounds.
90.
You want to set it right down in there? What about the bees that are on the bottom?
I don't know, did I kill them?
Well, yeah, you did.
Squash.
So if you set it like a corner like that, you're only gonna have bees under those few
Okay,
corners
okay.
instead of the whole bottom.
Now that that top box is off, I want to point out when you get your bees, your package for your nuke, you're going to start out with one box and 10 frames.
This
You're
will
not
be
going to
what you
have
start with.
the whole thing.
So when you say two you want to start with two colonies,
Mhm.
you're not talking two boxes, you're talking two complete separate.
Right.
Yeah, two stacks and a
But
separate
not-
colony of bees in each one.
So like two sets of two.
Right.
Okay.
Yep, so somebody show how you would install a package and how you would install a nuke in that box.
Okay, you got a nuke. You
Okay.
got a box with 5 frames with bees on it and everything. This is brand new. This is your
Okay.
whole new setup.
At home, this is what I have.
This is what you got set up for your bees that are coming.
I don't know, do I have to take some of these out?
Well, yeah, let's take those out because you'll have to have room for these 5 that you got in your new
Okay.
box.
Are they going in the middle?
Do you have a nuke box here or not?
I think we do.
So let's pretend this is your nuke and 5 frames. Those 5 frames.
So
Okay,
we're gonna put those in here. How do you want to do that?
okay, I probably want to put them in the middle, I don't know.
Okay,
Okay.
so how many do you have to,
I don't know how many are there,
there's 5 in here,
so I have to take 5 out?
at least.
Okay. Gosh, I just.
Which
Generally,
this
what
is
you want to
brand
do
new.
is slide these around. So
Oh.
slide those
Oh, I could
that
just
way,
take out,
Slide those that way.
They're all empty. We don't even have to pretend they're all empty, so. it
I
doesn't
just
really
take out
matter.
5 on the outside, that's what my brain's thinking, but I'm
No.
thinking a little.
And then you can just take these and throw them all away because you're never gonna need these again.
Now he's throwing my stuff away.
He's giving you a hard time.
Okay.
So that's how you just do it.
Okay, so then they're putting these in?
Yeah.
Are we
Now,
done?
another clue, you might want to take out just a couple more. Gives you just a little bit more space.
Mhm. Okay. Use these.
Those frames are covered in bees.
They are, so I need.
Yeah, you'll wanna be a little more yoga-like.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
I
you'll want
actually
to put
do
them,
yoga, so I
you'll want to
can.
put those in this one the same way
order.
that they come
Oh.
out of here.
Okay, am I doing that?
Well, so
So
far,
far you have been.
but one thing helpful with this is, if that was the one that's going over here, put that one in first.
Okay.
And then slide these over. And then you got room for your
Okay.
last 2. You got your inner cover there. Make sure you keep all these taped together too.
Otherwise, they fill it up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Say that again, keep these tight in the middle.
right. You don't want to have something like
Yeah.
that because pretty soon you'll have all kinds of.
They'll draw,
wax comb
they'll draw extra fat tone
Learned about
where
bee
where you're
space.
losing space.
I haven't, but. it-
Not in the,
Okay.
not in the
They
stuff
do
yet.
that.
Yeah,
And
so
then you
they,
put
they,
your
there's
entrance
so much
reducer on
space,
the front.
otherwise they'll fill it up, so.
So
Make
the
the
bees
outside
can-
ones a little, extra
Yeah,
outside
have
a
a
little
hole.
fatter, but it's all right, that's good store honey.
Okay,
You might want to have a feeder for that too. we talked about those feeders that would fit inside or on top or
Yeah.
something else. So you'd want to have that in there.
Does that go between the two things?
No, it would go.
You replace the frame,
Replace a couple of
Right
frames,
Oh,
frame feeder.
or the type that goes on top.
yeah.
There's not much nectar quite yet. Yeah. And when you get a new one, they got a lot of building.
Because they're gonna have to make wax on all those.
Sugar
empty
water will get their
foundation
wax
things.
plants going.
Take that inner cover off for me once. So let's say that same scenario, these were the frames that you got in your nuke. The blue tape represents where the brood is at on the frames. So is anybody,
Is that an actual thing that you do
No.
no, I'm just saying.
for
that
demonstration
This,
purposes?
for demonstration, yeah, this frame's got brood from here to here, and this one's got brood from here to here, so this one's much smaller.
So if you consider this a nest for the bees, what did you just do with this one?
That one's got no brood on it, so anybody have a concern or problem with
Seems like
that?
you'd split it up and then the queen would have to travel across
Yep.
Would she,
on lack of nests.
would she not?
Yeah, would she?
And remember,
Maybe not.
I said I'm gonna remind you all the
So
time
is
to
that
ask perspective, or who's giving you the
What time of
advice.
the year is it?
What time of year is it? Okay, it's April and it's getting down to 40
It's gonna
degrees
get
at night.
cold.
Yeah.
They're gonna have a hard time keeping all that
Oh, yeah.
warm if they're separated.
That ball of bees now has to spread out over
So
a frame that they didn't used to have to spread
Together,
out.
so all the
over.
bees can be
So you want, yeah, you
tied together there.
especially in the spring, you want the brood to all be together so they can keep that all warm.
But they'll probably do that naturally.
Yeah, that's how they do it. But
So you got 5 frames in there, and then we're gonna start making wax on these other ones, and more bees are gonna be.
they'll merge and you get.
So once you got 5 frames here, once you get 7 frames that are full of the wax comb and stuff,
And covered in bees.
and have bees on them, then what do you wanna do?
Put another box on top.
Put another box on top.
So that they realize
Am I
it's there
putting these back in
before
there?
they fill it up.
And I even move one frame up to the top to encourage them to go.
Because you
Like
start
that
with
already-
this,
Because it has stuff on it?
Yeah, they can smell, okay, we got space.
because otherwise you're starting with,
Yeah,
you're starting with this, why, what bee wants to go up there?
yeah.
It's a lot of work.
So would you prefer to take one, say this is here, would you take one of these and move it up, or one of those, or is it? You probably don't want to mess up the,
You don't
The
wanna take
center of it.
brood, but you
so
wanna
one of
take
the 2 from the others.
Yeah.
other ones.
And you might,
If it's, usually by the time you're putting the second story on, it's warm, and I don't.
and the
I'm all
heat's
right
gonna
putting
go
one
up
there.
and keep them warm.
If their
Your-
population's big, if they're, filled that, you can put one brood frame up here and they'll be fine.
Because the
Where would
bees
you-
that are down around on the honey frames or something, when it gets cool at night, they'll come up and cover that one with brood up to keep it warm.
Yep.
So you've got the choice of these brood frames or these brood frames. Which frame would you move and where would you put it in that top box?
I'd probably move one of the edge ones, that's
Go
not
ahead.
as full,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
like. Probably one of these, because it's got a little bit, and I'd probably put it in the center.
There you go. Put it
And
in
they'll
the
build- they'll probably
center.
build off.
Because
of
heat
that.
rises.
So-
you wanna
So pretend that
put it
those
above that.
aren't in there. That one should go in the center.
Like right there.
And then if the bees need to cluster, that ball of bees is still towards the center and it's right above the brood below it.
But those should always be full of frames, right? You
The
don't want
boxes
to
should
do-
always be full of frames.
Yeah,
Yeah, so it should be 10 in here.
Okay.
Yeah.
because you get miscellaneous foam.
And the 8 frames are in the same size, but just
Yep, same depth.
Same length, yeah, from ear to
the
ear.
frames are all the same.
Yeah.
just the boxes,
Yeah.
so it's-
So are you ever doing anything with, what is this thing called?
Frame.
Frames.
The frame, are you
Foundation frame.
ever doing anything with the frames, or are they just like, there's not maintenance that you need to do on them?
It's so you can actually look at the bees so you can pull them out and look at the comb.
But you don't ever have to, do you get to a point where you're like, this one's garbage?
Yeah,
Okay.
maybe, yep.
Especially,
Replacing the wax.
Yeah,
especially the ones that you got with the nuke,
Mhm.
because the guy who sold you the nuke was getting rid of his old junky frames anyway.
Okay.
So those would probably be the first ones,
Mhm.
maybe not this year, but next year.
some nuke salesmen do that. Right.
And
But
the
that's an
bees,
instance.
the bees will put comb on top, so pay attention to, come over here. See how the frames don't come all the way to the top?
Yeah.
Okay, and see on the bottom there, those frames don't go all the way to
Yeah.
the bottom. So there's a gap between the top of these and the bottom of these. And
You only
it's,
paint the
it's
external.
just big enough, a couple of bees can pass, but it is big enough that they will put some burr comb in. So they'll put comb on top of this frame and sometimes on the bottom of the next one. If that starts getting in your way,
Yeah.
then you might want to take the hive tool and scrape it off. They'll sometimes do that on the sides too. So not exactly maintenance, but yeah, something that most beekeepers do once in a while is clean some of that burr comb off the top and the bottoms.
Yeah, when you start, you're gonna wanna look at frames, you're gonna learn how to handle frames. One thing that I find really helpful is when it's going on in the season and this is full and that's full, it's sometimes really helpful just to sit there and look from underneath and because if they start building queen cells, they usually hang it right here, they're starting to swarm. They think about swarming. Yeah. So you can tell how full they're getting by looking here and looking that. So that's called inner checking. So,
But to do this, one of the most important things that I found out is this has got 4 frames of honey on it besides all the bees. You just want to pick it up like this,
yeah,
it's gonna fall right out. So when you bring it loose, you're gonna want to pull it back
yep.
an inch or so. So when you tip it up, it's not sliding off the front of your leg.
That's just a way to check to see if like any.
Kinda,
So
yeah,
they don't
just
swarm and you
kind of
add another one
monitor. Yep,
or.
yep.
And in queen cells, they're ready to do something
Yeah,
else.
yep, that's.
So how, are you really harvesting like once a year? I mean, depending on how many you have. but
Generally, yeah.
Because they aren't gonna have any honey in May.
Yeah, and where?
In June, they're gonna start doing it. July.
Mhm.
So if they keep their brood, the bottom, they're always putting their honey on the top. So you keep
That's
adding
right.
boxes on the top.
So where's the honey, like it's not just going into the, like where?
Right, they keep storing it, so you'll have another box, another box, another box. You'll harvest the top box.
Which I had all that stuff set up here. So we can see that.
Okay.
So that's where you put a queen excluder and then add more boxes. They'll fill that with honey. And then hopefully they still have honey here for them to eat themselves. That's the idea.
Well, can we just pound it down in there a little tighter?
I guess you could. Everybody like that. And I like to have them like, yeah, together like that because then the bees are gonna draw that out right straight. If you do something like that, then you gotta, we'll start building comb this way and it's a mess.
Do you prefer the plastic or the wood or does it not matter?
I prefer the wood, that's just me.
I like the plastic.
Just like personal
I
preference?
have a mix of
More
both.
durable. I don't know if I like plastic because if this frame gets old, I can replace this foundation.
Yeah.
Keep this.
This would be groove top and bottom. Yeah, so that's groove top and bottom. We didn't talk a whole lot about the frames and the options, other than that, there are a lot of options. That's groove top and bottom, and this is plastic foundation that's been coated with wax, and it's pretty easy to pop it
And
back.
as John said, he does some foundationless, so he put a frame like that in without the foundation.
Yeah, you'd have to put a paint stick or something in that top groove to give them a guide. It could go foundationless.
Most natural is to actually just use wax foundation in wood, that would be the most.
Yep, sure.
Is this a plastic core in there? Or is this
Yeah.
a-
Yep, it's plastic core and it's
It's
pretty
sturdy.
tough and pretty flat. Yep, yeah, you won't hurt it. And then there's, there's pure wax foundation too, but that's pretty flimsy. And so then a lot of times they'll run wires. You see those frames that got holes in them for you to run wires. And then you have to embed the wax or embed the wire in the wax.
Put little, almost like hairpins through here to hold it. That's what I've done before.
That's why a lot of people like the plastic foundation is it's just popping.
It's really sturdy and the plastic is waste though, so that's just one thing.
Do the bees prefer one than the other?
It depends on who you talk to.
In my hives, the bees definitely prefer foundationless. They will go to those frames and draw them out first. And then they'll go to the plastic.
I would say
this wax.
More coating, the more wax coating on here, the better.
Yeah, that's
I
probably.
buy the triple coated. I just prefer that. It's more expensive, but it's worth it because you just start drawing it out of it.
Well, thanks everybody for showing up. Hope we didn't overwhelm you too much. Yeah, wait till next week.
Homestead then?